3, 2. Shalom, and welcome to another Chamor podcast from Bay Abedan, teaching Noahide Judaism for Messianic Hebrews. It's Friday, the 7th of February, 2025. So it's time for another one of our Chatava sessions. Khutbah is, of course, the original Hebrew term from which the Arabic or Judeo-Arabic term Khutbah comes from. Khatva is a report, a story, a summary, or something like that. And we do these sometimes on Friday afternoons for a Messianic Hebrew audience. So last Friday, I have, and you can see I've got in the studio again with me JC. JC is here. Hello, JC. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, Joe?
Baruch Hashem, I'm doing very well. JC and I were on last week, if you were watching last week. Or if you watched last week's session, we were talking about the historical chronology of the origins of Islam. And we got to the point where we started to talk about the origin of the Quran. So that's why today's show is called Quran Origins. And it's, again, another khutbah for Messianic Hebrews. So JC and I are just going to have our own sort of chit-chat again. Lots of you, about 300 of you tuned in to listen to this over the past week. So that was good. So obviously you enjoyed that. So here's another part for you. It's part 2, another session. So it seems that people like listening to us having a chit chat. So we're just going to chat away and talk about this. And it seems like this is a good way for people to follow as well, because it's just JC and I seem to have a very good rapport when it comes to just talking about topics. He knows what I'm talking about. I know what he's talking about. And so it might be interesting for you to listen to. So Quran origins today. All right, then, JC. Do you want to introduce yourself again for the audience or say anything you want to before we jump in?
Well, I would just like to say that last week, the conversation that we have was like really, really good. More often than not, when people talk about the origins of Islam, they seem to just be talking. They jump into the Umayyads, for example, or they're thinking, oh, religion, but they don't really think about, well, what happened before then, and consider what was happening around Jerusalem with all of these different factions, what actually was the setting that made everything happen much later. So it was a very, very good thing that we spoke from even the 500s, when everything really began to, all of these conflicts were developing. And then we got all the way to Umar, which I think everybody is always very interested about. Umar, or that thing that happened between Umar and Ali. And then 200 years later, we have this new religion. So we are now probably at that particular specific period of time where things have already been escalating for a while and they are about to kick off. So I'm really looking forward to actually talking with you and seeing what your beliefs are as to what happened during that very, very important period of our history, which is not very much discussed. And let's see what we make out of it.
Mm-hmm. Right, very good. Yes. So, well, I think the first thing. So last week we focused really on the fundamental sort of text which we started to dive into and explain, use as our sort of skeleton that we built everything around, was Sebios. And so this week we've got another text which is relevant to the origins of the Quran. Sebios' text is relevant to the origins of the Arabic Empire. And so now we have a different thing which we focus on for the origins of the Quran. And that was in some correspondence between, and it's the earliest document concerning the origin of the Quran in existence. There is no document earlier than this. There is no comment. So we're not interested in the Islamic hadiths. We're not interested in Islamic seerah, just like last week. We're looking at something which is closer to contemporary. So the earliest thing we have, which talks about the origin of the Quran, is actually a piece of correspondence between Leo the Isaurian and Omar II. He was an Umayyad caliph. That is not the earliest reference to a book of the Arabs. The earliest reference to a book of the Arabs, or a tome, was actually it was first mentioned in the 650s, really, really early 650s, in the prosecution of Pope Martin, who was arrested for collaboration with the Saracens concerning their tome in the 650s, and they actually sentenced him to death. And then the Arabs invaded and they commuted his sentence to exile instead, and the Arabs stopped invasion. So that was a very interesting passage. That's really interesting. Cannot be ignored. I mean, a lot of Catholics would love to ignore that and just gloss over that, pretend that never happened. But the fact of the matter is that Pope was arrested, was sentenced to death, and was then exiled, all in the 650s. And the main accusation against him was this collaboration because of some kind of work together on this tome. And they had a copy of the tome, or proof that the tome existed, in his hands, or in the Vatican's hands. And that has been the origin of a conspiracy theory promoted by somebody called Riviere, Alberto Riviere. You might have come across him, who really was talking about this topic, and that has spread. It's just taken a life of its own. It's gone off and spread into the idea that the Catholics created the Quran, or the Pope created the Quran, etc. That's a big, weird conspiracy out there. But it's actually based on this historical case where Pope Martin was arrested, put on trial, found guilty, sentenced to death, and then when the Arab invasion happened, his sentence was commuted to exile. But we don't really know anything about it. It doesn't say that he wrote it. It doesn't say that the Vatican wrote it. It just says that there was that he had some kind of collaboration or involvement concerning this tome. And of course, tome means a big book, the Tome of the Arabs. And we don't really know anything more about it. So that's not enough to go on. We don't know who the author was. You can't say there's anything clear about, or it's clear that this was actually authored by the Vatican. There's no indication that at all whatsoever. That's a conspiracy theory. So we need something a little bit more tangible than that. And so the source that I like to use is the correspondence between Leo the Isaurian and Omar the Second, the Umayyad Caliph. Okay, and in this correspondence, it doesn't, of course, in both cases, it is not called the Quran. It's just a book or of the Arabs. And in this case, Leo is sort of putting Omar in his place and saying everybody knows the source of this. Everybody knows that the origin of this, the author of this text, the authors were, and he lists an emir, which usually understood to be Omar, because we're not sure if he's saying emir or Omar, but we've got one word there. I will say it's emir for now to be very non-specific about it. Let's just say it means an emir. Okay, and then it says Abu Turab, which is associated with Ali. That's another name for Ali. But as we identified last week, Ali is Hani ibn Qabisa in our historical model. So Abu Turab. And then he says Solomon the Pharisee. And then this is identified usually by Muslims as Salman Fars, who is supposed to be a disciple of Muhammad. But this word, which is used, Farsi, can mean both Pharisee and Persian. So take your pick. It's either a Persian or a Pharisee. Now, I take the Pharisee position, and it's the same spelling, same word, but did it mean Pharisee? This is in Arabic. It's the same word. Did it mean Pharisee, as in a kind of Jewish movement, or does it mean Persian? Okay, Farsi. So difficult to know. I take the position this is very clearly a reference to a Pharisee, and I suggest, and so does Ben Abrahamson, my colleague in this, both of us suggest that Salman the Pharisee, the Farsi, was actually a Pharisee and was actually related to the exilarchs who we talked about last week as well. So we got these three authors, and this is the text. This is the framework I like to use for the origin of the Quran. Okay, this is the earliest source we have concerning who was behind this, and it's from the same imperial archives which were accusing Pope Martin of being guilty of collaboration on this tome. But it does not say that Pope Martin was involved in writing this. It says that the writers of this text were the emir, Abu Turab, and Solomon the Pharisee. Okay, so that's our starting point. Do you have any comment at this point?
That I totally agree, actually. In fact, when trying to find the answers to what was happening in the very early days, I have always gone back to that specific letter, because you would expect the information that came to the emperor of the Byzantine Empire to have the best information available at the time. He wouldn't actually have made up names. He would have had spies everywhere.
Exactly.
And if he says those three guys were responsible for it, then they were responsible for it. And of course, with all of the information that you've given about all of this conflict that was going on, it makes sense. I think it's maybe worth noting that those letters, if all of the dates are correct, it would have happened around the year 720. I think that's when both kings, Umar, Leo III, and Umar II were in power. So it's actually not, many hundreds of years after the whole thing. There are people alive at that point that actually lived through the whole thing. So it was very, very recent times.
Yes, exactly. So if this tome came into existence in the 650s, which is what the first source indicates, the one that says that Pope Martin was involved in granting them this tome, then this is only 70 years later, and it's conceivable that there would be some elders who were alive at both times who could have known something. Somebody who's 80 years old, possibly even 90 years old. This is not unbelievable that people who were living in imperial palaces could have reached such ages, and we do know that some people did. So, but more importantly, it at the very least, it's definitely the children of the people who were involved in discovering this. And as you mentioned, this is the imperial power, basically talking to the head of the other major empire, which has just succeeded from Persia. They would have had a lot of intelligence on this. Spying is nothing new. Spies are ancient, millennia old. People have spies, and it was much, much easier to spy in the early days than it is today. Today, it's very difficult to spy on each other. You've got background checks, DNA, all sorts of things you can do on people to find out if they are who they say they are. But in the olden days, all you needed to do was look like the people that you're spying on and speak the same language fluently. That was all that was necessary. And if you had a lot of money behind you, you could find yourself up to a very close position right next to the leaders very easily. And so it wasn't difficult. And I agree with you exactly. That was the key point is this is top imperial intelligence, which is being discussed in the 720s here, of something which was only maybe 70 years beforehand by the children of the ones who did it. Okay. And I think that that cannot be just cast aside and say, let's ignore that. That's irrelevant. And there's another reason why this is not irrelevant. This is very important as well, because we have an independent corroboration of this source from a non-Byzantine source. Okay, so that's a Byzantine source. It corresponds as letter from Leo the Isaurian, putting Omar II of the Umayyad Caliphate in his place concerning the origin of this book. And then we have a non-Byzantine source corroborating this, not directly, but indirect corroboration. Now, what does it say? The non-Byzantine source is the Alawite and the Alevi sources. There are two sources, actually. You can say that if it's Alawite and it's Alevi, it's the same thing, because Alawites are nothing but the Arabic version of the Alevis. Alevis are Kurdish and Turkish, and Alawites are Arabic, but they're the same people. Nevertheless, they have they have slight difference in their sources, and they say that in the Alawite version, it says that they have this kind of trinity who are responsible for the foundation of Islam, and that is Muhammad, Ali, and Solomon the Pharisee. So you've got that in the Alawite source there. That's an Arabic source. The Alevis also have the kind of a trinity, where they have, instead of Solomon, they have Haq instead, the truth. And they have this trinity of Haq, Muhammad, Ali. So you've got Muhammad, Ali, and Haq in one, and you've got Muhammad, Ali, and Solomon the First in the other. So what we have here is an independent corroboration saying that the authors of Islam. It's indirect. It's not perfect, but it's good independent corroboration that the authors of Islam were these three. And
actually, if I may, I don't know, actually, when you said we're going to talk about the correspondence from Leo III, are you going to talk about the ones in the other direction, from Umar II to Leo III?
No, I don't. You can if you want to. I don't think it's relevant, but if you want to bring it up, you go ahead.
Well, something yes, fun. I read this once a while ago, so I can't actually remember exactly what it was said. I'm just trying to recall, but I seem to recall that the correspondence then from Umar II back to Leo III, he should have said, "What are you talking about? That our book was created by those guys." He doesn't say anything of the sort. He just actually goes back and does the normal, say, Dawa approach of saying, "Yeah, you believe that God died," or something of the sort. He does not deny that thing which he should have really have said, no, you're talking nonsense. Our book was divine. So I would then add to the sources that you've mentioned by saying that Umar II didn't actually deny it. He just went on a different tangent.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So that is actually very, very important. I'm sorry, I didn't realize. But basically, what you're talking about is silence in this case speaks volumes. That's basically it. Yeah, and that is actually very, very important. Yes. So his silence on that matter is exceptional. So I think there's an independent corroboration there. So you could say that's probably a third corroboration. So we've got three corroborating points. First of all, his silence is a kind of corroboration. Secondly, you've got this Alawite source. If you want to include the Alevi source as well, you've got that. And you've got the comment by Leo the Isaurian himself as well. So we've got, it's not weak. Let's put it this way. It's not weak. It is strong. And it is the earliest source concerning the origin of the Quran. So that is my reason, or those are my reasons that I think this should be the framework that we work on. What we try to build our historical picture on should be around this framework, okay? Rather than just swallowing the standard Islamic narrative without question. Now, having said that, I don't think that the standard Islamic narrative on the origin of the Quran comes from nowhere. I think it is an amalgamation of various stories. So, first of all, last week, we touched upon it briefly last week when we talked about the conversion of Omar and then his reception of Gabriel of Cartmin. And when Gabriel of Cartmin brought him the translations, which John of the Seder had organized the Tayaya to do for him of the Christian texts, and the story shows that he is very receptive to Gabriel at that time. So, what was translated? Well, it was the Christian documents. The New Testament was supposed to be translated, but I think that there's possibly something else which was translated at that time, and that would be the Palestinian Syriac lectionary, which is maybe the version of the gospel was translated, because we have versions of the gospel. Apparently, the earliest gospel translated from Syriac into Arabic is from the 1100s. So we need something much earlier than that, which could correspond to this story. And I think that's the Palestinian Syriac lectionary, which was translated much earlier than that. So the word lectionary is Karyana. Actually, that's with a definite article. Karyan-a means the lectionary. The a, the final suffix a, is a definite article, means the or the, right? So you take away a, and Karyan-a becomes Karyan. And Karyan is nothing but the Syriac way of saying Quran. Okay, so we have this word. Quran is the Arabic version or Arabic translation of the Syriac word Karyan. So that's also something we should focus on. So the Palestinian Syriac lectionary, we have copies today. I've got a copy in my hand right now. It's the Cambridge Library Collection, a Palestinian Syriac lectionary containing lessons from the Pentateuch, Job, Proverbs, Prophets, Acts, and Epistles, and it's edited by Agnes Smith Lewis. If you want to get a copy of that, that's from Cambridge University Press. It's basically an Aramaic reader. It's for learning Aramaic. It's got the whole lectionary in Aramaic in here, and it's got every single word in a glossary. Every single word which is used in Aramaic in this text is there in a glossary with translation into the corresponding Koine Greek. So you need to know Greek. Doesn't translate it in English. It's a Greek to Syriac and Syriac to Greek translation here. So it teaches you the Syriac words which correspond to the Greek words of the Septuagint and 27 New Testament texts which are relevant to the Syriac lectionary. It's got also some really interesting historical critical notes, which are very important to understand exactly how and why they date this Palestinian Syriac lectionary. They date it, this particular one, they say that this copy itself, they date back to, I think, the 800s, but it is a copy of the earlier ones, which have been in the hands of the Oriental Christians or Miaphysite Christians, as we call them, Miaphysite Noahides, for a very long time before that. So that's the central book, and this book was translated to Arabic, and we have Arabic versions of this book in existence today. I'm going to show on the screen right now. I'm going to share the screen so everybody can see these pages from these two texts side by side. These are not the same pages, it's just so you can get an idea of what they look like. So let me just share the whole screen for a second. All right, and we're going to look at this. This is a presentation. Hopefully that's coming up right now. Is it showing? I've got to put that on the screen, haven't I? So yeah, that should be there. Here we go. So this is what you've got. Can you see this?
It's loading, still loading. Any moment now. Yeah, it's now on the screen.
Yeah. So you have there on one side, on the left-hand side, you have a couple of pages from the original 7th century Syriac lectionary. And on the right-hand side, you have the Arabic translation of it. And this is the original Arabic Quran, as opposed to what we know as the Islamic Quran. Okay, this is the Arabic Quran, a translation of the Syriac Karyan. And when we say, oh, you're saying it wrong, it's Karyana. No, that's with the definite article. So you can say it's the Arabic, this is Al-Quran, the Quran is Karyan A. But if we take away the al and we use English, the instead, the definite article, this is on the one side the Arabic Quran, and on the left side the Syriac Karyan. So this is what was translated. And Gabriel gave this to Omar. Gabriel of Cartman gave this Arabic Quran to Omar. This is a translation from the Syriac Karyan. But be, I should like, attention, you know, careful, double. I want to make sure that you're all very aware of this. This Arabic Quran, the original translation of the Syriac Karyan, has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the Islamic Quran. And this is what I think people were not really getting when I was talking about it on Al-Fadi and when I was talking about it on Jay Smith, and I tried to talk about it on various channels beforehand. And they couldn't get into their heads the concept that there would be something called an Arabic Quran, which has nothing to do whatsoever with the Islamic Quran. Have I made it clear this time?
Well, definitely for me, and I've been doing a lot of work on this as well. And yeah, Quran means, the word means one thing, but when they used it, or we use it now, it means something else. It's a very different book. What we're looking at is basically a dictionary that translates from one language to the other. But what we have now, and we call Quran, it has nothing to do with this. It basically is a word used in a different manner. I noticed that, by the way, the Arabic translation on the right-hand side has all of the diacritical marks and stuff, and I think the script seems to be quite modern. So I suppose we don't actually have copies of the actual translation from back in the day before they introduced the diacritics. That has probably been
preservation. I think this is from the 9th century that we see here. Yeah. This is the 800s. This text, you know, every time I talk about something like this, and this was even before Daesh came along, every time we talk about something like this, suddenly some fanatical Islamist faction rises up and starts destroying things. Okay, so ironically, again, when I talked about this last time, there was no fanatical Islamist sect which was out there trying to destroy and burn this thing, this Arabic Quran. But now there is in the location where it is. So I don't want to really go over it right now, but if people want to go talk with me privately about it, then we can talk about it on an academic level for people who are seriously interested about that. People have gone around and smashed inscriptions, very important ancient inscriptions, like the one we talked about last week. JC, you and I talked about, and I sent you a book with the location of the inscription, etc., and the text, and it's people who are very, very insecure. Okay, very, very insecure people think that it's their mission to go and smash these objects, destroy this historical artifacts, burn them if necessary, in order to protect their worldview, that everything has to be according to the standard Islamic narrative. These are very insecure individuals, but we can't deny that they exist, and unfortunately they are part of a larger insecure movement, which we call the Islamist movement, unfortunately. So I'm not going to talk about older versions and where they are held, and I'm not going to show pictures of them either. But in the academic world, and I have people, I've got one. He doesn't stop harassing me. He keeps on trying to find out, pretending to be very interested in an academic level. He keeps on trying to find out where can he get hold of certain copies. And I say to him, go to university, get a degree in this field, and you will have access to these things because you have a degree in this field. But if you don't go to university and get a degree in this field, you will not have access to these things because they are very, very precious. Luckily, as you see, the one on the left-hand side has become very popular because people want to learn Aramaic, people want to learn Syriac, and so Syriac materials are often made available. The one on the left-hand side is actually available for about $20 on Amazon, and you can get it's been photocopied, and there are thousands and thousands of copies of it available. However, the one on the right-hand side and the earlier versions of it are simply not popular because when people want to learn Arabic, they usually use Quranic materials, Islamic materials, and they learn Arabic from Islamic sources. They don't learn Arabic from Christian sources. And so something like this is very specialized, very particular, very unique, and is really held in very special places where academics who are fully qualified have access to this sort of material. But there are older versions of it, which were, and it was translated for the first time in the 7th century. We know that. It was translated for the first time in the 7th century. But this is not a dictionary. This is a lectionary. And a lectionary is a collection of readings from the Bible. And this is why I say the original 7th century Arabic Quran, which you can see a version of it here. Okay, there's a version of that original text. It's copied out word for word. That original Arabic Quran has nothing to do with the Islamic Quran. You will not find a single paragraph in the original Arabic Quran which is the same as any paragraph in the modern day or even an earlier version of the current Islamic Quran. These are two completely different books.
Right. And following on from the conversation that we had last week, you think that when it is Umar who, well, according to traditions, he strikes his sister down because she's reading something, and then is when he starts exploring, and this is exactly what he gets, and it makes him change his worldview, say.
I think so, yes. So I think that what his sister is reading is the one on the left-hand side. Once he gets a copy, a translated copy, which is like the one on the right-hand side, and he can understand it, he is cut to the heart, and he's filled with remorse, and he converts. because this.
Okay, right. So
Yeah.
so we're saying that maybe his sister actually speaks Aramaic, so she's actually reading it directly
she's
as
a
it says.
believer, so she's reading the Syriac. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Because it says in the Hadith that he couldn't understand the writing of what his sister was reading, and when somebody else translated it for him, then he was cut to the heart and he converted. That's the standard Islamic story. So I think, okay, that's interesting. That's quite interesting. So that sort of corresponds. Now, the other thing which is about this is the origin of this. We're talking about the origin of the story of the angel Gabriel, or the messenger Gabriel, bringing the Quran to Muhammad in the cave in Hira, and revealing the Quran to the leader of the Arabs, and giving it to him in Hira, and teaching him basically how to read it. So I think that legend of Gabriel giving the Quran to the leader of the Arabs is from this encounter between Omar, the leader of the Arabs, and Gabriel of Khatmin. But the book which was given, and so there's a kind of, as I'm saying, there's no smoke without fire, but the fire behind this Islamic story is the true story of Gabriel of Khatmin giving a translation of Syriac Christian materials to Omar, the leader of the Arabs. And that's where this legend of Gabriel revealing the Quran to Muhammad in the cave comes from. It wasn't Muhammad that it was revealed to. It wasn't even the Islamic Quran or anything like the Islamic Quran which was revealed, but it was the original Arabic Quran, which was given to the leader of the Arabs. And it was given in the 740s. Sorry, in the 640s. It was given in 640s. So that's the step one. And as I say,
and then much later on, when they actually get this book and it is compiled, there and Jibril only is mentioned by name 3 times in the Quran. 2 of those occasions is back to back. So they had a couple of mentions about the angel Gabriel, and they are mixing the story between the guy who was called Gabriel and the angel, and they think, well, this is then the revelation that was given, as opposed to there are 2 different characters.
How do we know that the Gabriel mentioned in the Quran isn't Gabriel of Khatmin? How do we know? How do we know this angel Gabriel rather than actually Gabriel of Khatmin? Because when it says, for example, and I'll tell you that when the Islamic Quran is talking about the Quran, it's talking about this text on the right-hand side here. It's not talking about itself. The text which we call today the Islamic Quran, inside of the pages of the Islamic Quran, refers to itself as As-Sana al-Hadith. It never refers to itself as Quran. So when the As-Sana al-Hadith is talking about the Quran, what is it talking about? It's talking about this text you can see on the right-hand side of the screen. This is the Quran, which is being discussed in the Islamic Quran. Do you understand me?
Yes, I think, well, just looking at how not often Gabriel appears in the Quran by name, of course, all the other ones that will say spirit or something like that, but or angel, but it only appears 3 times. I think it's Surah 2 verses 86 and 87, something like that, and they seem to be confused as to what that Gabriel is. But in one of them, they put him together with Michael. It says and Gabriel and Michael. So I think they have a bit of a confusion as to who they are. On the one hand, they think it is the angel of the Abrahamic faith, and on the other one is like someone who gives a revelation. But it is just surprising that it only is mentioned by name 3 times. I need to look into those verses in more detail. I think they really meant the angel. And it is in the narratives that they get very, very confused because of this man actually giving the lectionary. So that would make sense. But I need to look into it in more detail.
Let's try and find it, actually. Let's give one of those verses where it mentions Gabriel and see if we can find those 3. So I think when it says who is an enemy to Gabriel, it's Surah 2, isn't it? And
yes, 2, actually I have it here, 297 and 298, back to back.
Okay, let's go down and see. 297. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully I got it right.
So we've got that. Can you see this on the screen? Is this coming up on the screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Good, great. It's showing the Quran right now. Good. So, and you will surely find the most greedy of the mankind for life. 1,000 years from the punishment. Say, who is an enemy to Gabriel. And if we click on Gabriel, this concept here, we should be able to find the other occurrences of it in the Islamic Quran. Concordance. You click on this word concordance, and it tells you these are the three verses: 297, 298, and 66:4. So basically, two of them appearing at the same time, and one later. And I'm not entirely sure that we have. Maybe perhaps in 66 it might be talking about the angel Gabriel, or it might still be talking about some significant religious figure who was alive at that time and had authority over religion. So I don't sure. Maybe more likely. Well, still, you could make an argument. Let's put it this way: you could make an argument both ways. These are the two locations, Surah 2 and Surah 66. These are the two locations where you have the appearance of the mention of the word Gabriel, and you can make an argument, I think a convincing argument both ways, that it refers to the angel, or that it doesn't refer to an angel, it refers to a significant religious authority that was alive and real at the time and was responsible for giving maybe the Arabic Quran, this one on the right hand side down here, the Arabic Quran to the leader of the Arabs. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. So I think that
right.
Yeah.
So, well, I have to actually, and after this, I will look into those verses in detail. My gut feeling, but just take it with a pinch of salt, yes, a gut feeling, is that the two appearances in Surah 2 is talking about the angel, and the one in 66 is talking about the man, simply because, as I said, just a gut feeling, I need to look into it. There are some surahs that are a little bit odd, particularly, well, 8, 9, 33, and 66 are the ones with violent verses, the ones that about wives and about war, these sort of things. It's almost like they're talking about a caliph, perhaps Umar, Ali, any of them. So on 66, having that name in there, very close to those verses that they seem to be talking about a warrior king of sorts, I would say that one might actually be the man, the other one the angel. But like you said, you can probably make an argument on either or, and I will look into it. For now, yes, I put that one out there.
Yeah, he's saying basically who is
Yeah.
basically be careful of criticizing the Nabi and sort of getting into some kind of conspiracy against him because Gabriel is on his side. And this could also be basically saying don't it could be a reprimand to Miaphysite believers and saying, don't criticize the authority that you have here. This could be Omar, the Nabi could be Omar in this case. Don't criticize the authority who is being appointed over you in this case, because Gabriel of Cartman is on his side, and Gabriel of Cartman is really big in your church. And if you're criticizing him, then you're criticizing Gabriel of Cartman. So it could be a reference to the man.
Yeah, it is actually maybe worth noting that in the Quran, there are 13 verses that begin with O Prophet, the same in Arabic and in English, well, basically the same form. And those verses happen to be all about the violence, all about the slaves, the women, all these sort of things, which means, okay, this is not talking about a religious figure, it's talking about a warrior king of sorts. And there are only 13 occurrences, and they're pretty much in there, including in Surah 66. So they seem to be talking about someone else. It would make sense that particularly on that one, it is saying, this Nabi or this prophet, this informer.
Don't call him prophet. I've got something for you here. Nabi also means Nabatean. Okay, now with that in mind, because if it was Nabatean, it could be the prophet in Judeo-Arabic is still Navi, and that when it talks about Nabi, it's actually talking about a Nabatean leader. Now, a Nabatean leader is important and significant, but it does not necessarily anything to do with a prophet. That's probably the biggest, most controversial thing which people who are reading this Islamic Quran are going to have struggle with, is like divorcing themselves from the concept that the Islamic Quran is actually a religious text rather than a piece of cultural entertainment and propaganda, educational material for the empire, which has no real religious value other than that it refers to religious stories which are very well known by all of the people. It is not taking the side of one thing or another. Specifically in religious stories, it's just trying to get everybody on board with the culture, because they're trying to create an Arabic empire which is uniting a lot of different people, and it's using popular stories to do so. But there's no indication that you have to stop being a Pharisee or a Sabi or a Nasra or Ma'min. It doesn't. Whatever you are, you can continue to be. These are the common stories we have about these things, and it's much more like a form of educational entertainment, propaganda from the empire, rather than a religious state. And I think that the Nabi here is not a religious Nabi. I don't think it's religious at all. I think it's a Nabatean leader, which we're talking about here. But that's my take on things.
Wow, well, that's mind blowing. Now I have to go through the verses and see what happens when I put that word in there. I always try to read, when I see prophet, to read informer, because it's kind of like the same word to say, well, someone who gives information. But about a leader from the Nabateans, when it's actually in that region, that would actually make a lot of sense. So thank you for that. I need to now go through the Quran and have a look and see what happens.
Yeah, and I think that the Nabi that it's referring to is actually Hani ibn Qabisa. That's Ali, the person that we identified as Ali last week, and he is the Nabatean.
Okay,
I think
then
that's
actually before we move on from that, because then they would have been collecting all of these stories, probably, well, from the whole empire. They already have been conquering lands, and they are borrowing from all of these sorts. Do you think that then, for example, these verses, they may have been something to do with either during the time and rule of Ali? You mentioned as well, like Abdullah ibn al-Zubair, who comes later. Maybe some of the stories are about these guys, and then they get canonized later.
Yeah, I think it's possible. So first things first is let's carry on breaking down the Islamic narrative, the standard Islamic narrative concerning this. So we've broken down one aspect of the standard Islamic narrative, that the Quran was revealed by the angel Gabriel to the man who became the leader of the Arabs, okay, or the messenger Gabriel to the leader of the Arabs. And I've tried to explain that I think that this comes from a historical event, but it's nothing to do with obviously last week we made it clear that we're not talking about Hira in Hijaz. There was no I don't believe there was any Kaaba down there. There was no Muhammad down there. There was no Ali down there. But there is some kind of truth to this legend, to this story. And I think the truth to this story is that Gabriel of Cartman gave the Arabic Quran to Omar in the 640s. Now, there are other elements to the story. They say that that there was various scribes who would write down in the standard Islamic narrative. They say there were various scribes who would write down the recitations of Muhammad when he had a revelation. He would start reciting, and the scribes would write it down, and they would write it down on pieces of stone and pieces of parchment and pieces of leaves and various things like that, leather and materials, and that these scraps were collected together by they say that it was Omar who encouraged Abu Bakr because the number of people who could recite the Quran were dying, apparently, that the Qaris were dying, were being killed in wars, and so that somebody should gather together all the verses into one complete mushaf. And so they gathered all these scraps of paper, pieces of hide, pieces of leather, cloth, parchment, leaves, stones, and they brought it all together and they made one thing. And this collection is supposed to have started happening in the time of Abu Bakr. I doubt that. But it was made into one mushaf and given to Omar's daughter Hafsa to hold on to. And she held on to it until Uthman took that mushaf and made copies of it and sent it around all over his empire for everybody. So that's the standard Islamic narrative there. A little bit more, maybe not so standard, is that when the original idea was to try and get hold of a copy of a mushaf, Omar went to try and get it from Fatima, who was the wife of Ali and the daughter of Muhammad. and she refused to hand it to. He kicked the door in on her and caused her to have a miscarriage, which eventually killed her. And then they decided, well, we can't get it from her, so let's go and collect all these pieces together and make our own mushaf, our own book, instead of getting this book from Ali. This is a Shiite narrative. I believe that the Hadith actually has also got some Sunni source as well, but I don't know off the top of my head which Sunni source that is. But there are different interpretations of this story. One, the Shiite version, is that Omar was aggressively kicking the door in on Fatima, and she causing her to have a miscarriage and eventually died as a result. And the other, I think, is just that he went and asked politely for a copy, but she wouldn't hand it over, so they went and did their own version. Anyway, this is the full story there of how they say it originated. So
may I ask maybe a couple of questions?
Yeah.
So the whole story that the guy that has gone down in history as Zayd ibn Thabit, the one that actually is commanded to put it together, do you think that guy would have been instructed to put that from Umar's side? Umar says, okay, we don't have a book because Ali has the actual records. You go and create our book?
Yes, I believe so. So I think there's some truth in this. And the reason is because remember that Omar is the leader of the invasion of the Holy Land. In 634, he's there in Gaza. He's killing Christians. He's beheading them, forcing them to renounce Jesus. He is welcomed into Jerusalem in 636 by Sophronius, who's a patriarch, who hands the keys over to Omar. And Sophronius had been saying in other places about how these people were attacking pilgrims, Christian pilgrims, to Bethlehem beforehand. So we have some clear indication that they were very much against Christian believers. But having taken Jerusalem, and 10 years passed, and this story shows also the story that we talked about with last week with John of the Seder, the debate between the emir and John of the Seder, and the decision to get these Syriac materials, Christian materials, translated into Arabic for the emir, shows that he didn't believe the stories which the Syriac Christian was saying to him at that time. He didn't believe these things, and in the end, after a lot of sort of wrangling, conceded to allow these materials to be translated verbatim without any censorship. And then we have this story that the emir was totally sort of soft-hearted and in love with Gabriel of Cartmin when he handed these things over, and was basically seems to have been baptized at that time. So there was a very strong change of heart in this emir leader of Syria, and I think that is not going to necessarily, because when a politician suddenly has a change of heart and converts to a new religion, people who are defenders of certain texts and certain religions are not going to be inclined to say, yes, here, have the most sacred, collections we have. They belong to you now. We trust you with it. We can imagine if, say, for example, even though he is actually some kind of a Christian, supposedly, Donald Trump says that he's converted to Roman Catholicism and he's a complete devout believer in the Pope from now on. Do you think the Pope is going to say, well, here, have the Turin Shroud, take it? If he says, oh, Pope, I would like to have the Turin Shroud and I'd like to keep it safe in America, do you think the Pope's going to say, yeah, sure, take it to America and look after it? Certainly not. And so in the same way, you can't imagine that just because a political leader says he's had a change of heart, he's seen the light, he's converted now, and then says, could you please give me that collection of poems? I really want to have that to spread around the country and promote all over the world. It's very unlikely that the defenders of those poems are going to say to him, yeah, sure, here, have a copy. So I think that there is some truth in this idea that Omar tried to get hold of a copy from Ali's family, from Hani ibn Qabisa's family. Hani ibn Qabisa being in Iraq, in Hira in Iraq, was his base there. That Omar tried to get a copy and was refused, and then they had to start a commission to try and make their own version, their own copy, by collecting all the narrations which they could to assemble together into their own mushaf, which I believe that mushaf, which is referred to in the Islamic narrative as the version which was protected by Hafsa in her home. I believe that we have that mushaf. I believe that mushaf is the one which we found in Amr Masjid, which I've shown on this show before, which I've discussed on this show before. I have another picture of it as well, a couple of pages of it, which I can put up on the screen right now, if anybody is interested in that.
Yes, please. Certainly I am. But actually, before as well, we move on from that, because I'm trying to say in the shoes of that character and what would have been going through his head. And we discussed as well, like what happened like in Gaza, and then he took over the city and so on. So now he's got a change of heart and he is now converted to something. Now, what I struggle to understand is how then we would end up with a book, which of course it would have been edited later, but we end up with a book that is very different. Yes, because that guy wouldn't give him, say, for example, say that Ali had an actual translation from the gospel, and that
no. You've missed it. I thought this might happen. I'm still not managing to convey what I mean by an Arabic Quran and the Syriac Qaryana and the Islamic Quran. I'm still not getting the difference across clearly. But explain to me back. What do you think I'm talking about? And then we'll see where the error comes from.
Or rather, Umar converts to a new belief. So before he had one belief, probably he was either a Sadasi or probably, I think you mentioned one Sadasi and then you said Karaite. And then he has the whole thing in Gaza, the 60 martyrs of Gaza, and the thing with his sister. So he is of one belief. And then after the event with his sister, he says, okay, hang on a minute. Can I have these things that she was reading, but in my language? And then he has a change of hearts.
Yeah.
But so what I don't understand is if what he has now seen is translations of, or maybe extracts from the Gospels or whatever it is, that is what it is now his new belief.
Yeah.
And if it was perfectly preserved, say, or to a degree, that is exactly what we would have. But we seem to have now, or rather, tell me if I actually misunderstood. So though that version ends up like with Ali, and it has all of these poems, all of this poetry.
No.
So, but why wouldn't Umar, if he has now seen this document and says, okay, this is my new belief, why wouldn't that be the Quran that we have now completely? Because that's his new belief. How do we go from what he had originally and he changed his heart to a book that contains stories about the 7 sleepers in the cave and Alexander the Great and things that don't really seem to fit him receiving copies of the gospel? How do we go from A to B?
Yeah. So let me try and make it clear again. There are two completely different books, which we are calling the Quran. Okay. One of them is the original Arabic translation, word for word translation of the Syriac Qaryan. All right. And the other book is a collection of poems which were in the hands of Hani ibn Qabisa, Ali, and his family, which they didn't want to hand over to this born-again leader. And the born-again leader decided to collect those for his own purposes. And religion has nothing to do with it at this point. With regards to religion, Omar, the Emir, is simply now saying he's of the same religion that Hani ibn Qabisa is. But the texts that he wants from Hani ibn Qabisa are not, they're not religious guidance. They are cultural artifacts. They're culturally important a collection of poems by someone, okay, who I say is Hanzala. Okay, that's the historical author of these texts, and maybe some of them are also authored by Hani ibn Qabisa. Hanzala would be the original Amir. Hani ibn Qabisa would be the Abu Turab. And there is somebody else as well, Solomon the Pharisee. And these three people are the authors of this. And Omar is only responsible for trying to gathering these texts together to make a mushaf for his own purposes, which are to do with empire building. With regards to religion, he's hoping to build his empire with allies who are he is now saying that he's of the same religion with them. But those people who he is saying, I'm of the same religion of you, let's build an empire together. Let's gather these stories together and make them into our national epic, our culture. Because you know that cultures at that time had what we call like a national opera, a national epic. Many of these cultures had such things, and so the Persians had, and he's wanting to do something similar for the Arabs. They've just inherited the Persian Empire, but the only epics that they have, the only epic stories they have are Persian epics. So they want to have some Arabic epics to entertain the population, to give a culture, to build an empire on. And these epics should be from the same general religion that Omar now says he belongs to. But these texts which he wants to use for empire building are nothing to do with the religious texts which he has been converted by. Are you with me? Do you follow me now?
Yes, I'm with you, except that is the thing that I'm struggling to understand. So let me try to put it in my own words, and then you can see where I'm going wrong. So if we took a time travel machine and we went back to, say, the year 640, there are, say, two collections, say, around, or they exist. One is the translation of the gospel,
it's
and
not
they're
a collection.
calling it,
that's just a translation.
Yeah, translation. So let's call that, say, Quran. And then there is this epic histories like the Odyssey, sort of collection of things for to have fun with it. Then at one point in the future, actually the word Quran from the first one is on the other one, and they're trying to build an empire based on, or rather to unify their people. That is what I don't quite understand.
So who is responsible for shifting the word Quran from the Arabic Quran onto the collection of epic poetry? Yeah, is that what you're asking?
Or rather, why would they, when he has now been converted, why would he say, no, let's actually not push this Quran, which now I believe in, let's actually go with the epic stories because people will understand on the ground, and that's what you spread. But they seem to be quite disjointed. I think if I were in his shoes, I would have said, okay, we want the stories, but I want those epic stories from this other book, which I'm now converted to. So write stories about whatever, whether it is the Messiah, whether it is Moses, as opposed to gathering poems, which they seem to be very disjointed, and you're going to have a bit of a mishmash.
It's very simple. It's very intuitive as well. You want to convert the world today to Oriental Orthodoxy, okay, Oriental Orthodox Christianity. Okay, what do? Do you start, broadcasting Oriental Orthodox liturgy everywhere? Direct translations of Oriental Orthodox liturgy, long hours and hours long liturgy for people to listen to, without any context or understanding of what's this? Or do you start making lots of TV shows and movies and entertain like theatrical performances and pop songs about the topics which come up in those liturgies?
I would certainly do all of the different shows and stories, but they would be based on exactly the belief. Like, for example, if you say, okay, so converting people into,
if I say to you,
you would have lots of stories, about, say, Jesus, and stories about Moses, and then the miracles. You wouldn't actually put something about Alexander the Great.
Well, if I say to you, look, let's just play it out right now. You're Omar, you got converted, but in a modern scenario, so people understand the reality of the situation. Because when people think back in time, they're not able often to put themselves in those shoes and imagine the reality of the scenario. So you're now like the emperor of the world, okay? And you want to convert, and you've had an enlightening moment. You're like totally convinced by this liturgy. This liturgy has touched your heart, and specifically you murdered your sister because she was listening to this liturgy and you didn't realize that, and now you're feeling filled with remorse, filled with guilt, and you really want to push your sister's religion on the whole world, okay? Because you really want to repent for that and you feel guilt-ridden about it, okay? So you come to, like, I represent now like your council of advisors, okay? And you come to us and you say, I want to push this religion. I'm going to push my sister's religion on the whole world. And we say to you, you know what? That's not going to make you very popular. And the way in which to do it would be to, make pop songs, movies, films, TV shows, and have debates and have theatrical performances and advertising, slogans, and just push a big propaganda campaign around the world, because most people, once they see it and it becomes part of their consciousness, they're going to feel more inclined towards your religion than they are if you just start pushing this liturgy of your sister's religion upon everybody. That you might see reason in what we're saying, and you say, okay, fine, let's do that then. And imagine one of us puts their hands up and says, you don't have to. I know this guy. He's already got all of those pop songs and movie scripts and theater scripts, and he's got all of those debates. I know a guy who's got a whole collection of it. Are you not going to be interested in saying, well, come on, let's have a look at it. Put it on the table. Let's have a read. You follow me?
Yes, I follow you.
Are you not going to be interested in that?
Indeed.
So I think that's what happened with Omar. Somebody said, I know a guy. He's got it already. Who? Hani ibn Qabisa. Well, let's go and get a copy. And it's not just, I know a guy, but there's this part of the world, there's this area in Iraq where all of this is already happening. They're all pushing that culture. That culture all exists. So fine, okay, let's get a copy from this guy. And the guy says, no, I'm not going to hand you over our propaganda. So you say, it's okay. We don't have to have a copy. We can just go and watch the performances. We can just write them down. We can get this part of Iraq in Hira is already performing all that. Let's just collect that. This could be very useful for my plans. You see, that's all. That's all. So there's two things. There's the religion he wants to push, which is based on the Arabic translation of the Syriac lectionary and the Gospels. And then there's the means in which he hopes to push this religion, which already exists in Hira, in Iraq, and is already working down there with Hani ibn Qabisa's people. You see? That's the two texts which we're talking about.
Yeah.
The only question...
There is almost like the disconnect then between the religious approach and this is what we are going to show the people. Now, actually, if we just zero in on that one for a second, the Quran, if it was that, say, street performance, perhaps I'm just thinking in modern terms, that the text would read very, very much like something from Shakespeare, where you have this character saying something, or you say this, as opposed to one guy just talking, saying things like, say this, they say that.
I've shown the videos on my channel before of Persian theater, which is still performed to this very day, Persian Islamic theater in Arabic, but it's the continuation of the old Sasanian style theater, and these performances take place to this very day in Karbala every year when they have the pilgrimage. Have you not seen my channel's presentation of such things before?
No, I haven't seen that, but I will. So is it like your view that when the Quran, for example, says things in some verses, it begins with say something, and then they say something. It is a guy writing down what he sees in the performance. One guy saying this, and then the other guy says that.
Exactly. That's why it says, it'll say, and then like Moses is speaking, and then it's say, and it's Pharaoh is speaking, and it's say, and it's like Moses is speaking, and then it's say, and it's like Allah is speaking. Because the guy is writing down what they see being performed in front of them. Yeah, and
actually that makes a lot of sense as well, because of the when it's actually speaking in the present tense. Sorry, not in the present tense, in the first person. So there is a person actually saying that, and it sounds like he's God
I haven't got the video prepared because but there are videos you can watch of this. So the way it goes is like this. This kind of street performance, which is done by troubadours, and this is an ancient form of street theater, is that you will have like a stage area where there are like actors who are mimes acting out scenes next to a narrator who is standing on one side narrating the story. He narrates the story, and as he's narrating the story, the actors are miming appropriate actions which correspond to the story of the narrator. And then the narrator will say, and then one of the actors on stage will speak a line. And then the narrator will say again, say, and the next actor will speak their next line. And so this is how the performance is being carried out. The Quran is impossible to read as a story because it's not a story. It's a script. It's not just one script either. It's a series of scripts of many different street performances, all bundled together in one big mushaf. But that's exactly how it is actually supposed to be read.
Surprisingly, that actually makes a lot of sense. Now I need to actually go through those verses and then basically try to break them down like this and imagine the performance. Have you considered, because we spoke before about the verses that start with "O Prophet," and you said maybe that is about the Nabi. Do you think that maybe it was something like narrator speaking
to the audience who included the Nabi? So it's like there's this street performance going on. You've got these actors miming out the actions behind the narrator, who is the voice of the Quran, right? The narrating voice of the Quran. And every now and then the narrator says, say, and somebody acts it out. This could be performed in front of the royal court, where the Nabi is sitting down with his family watching it, along with people from it could be a celebratory day where they're all sitting down in the street. It's a nice day. The royal court is there watching. The citizens are there watching, and they're having a street performance. It could also be that there are other performances where the royal family are not going to be present, and they will have an actor on stage acting the role of the royal family, right? So different scenarios. But the point is, these are different scenes, different acts of different recitations, which are all bundled together in one book called the Quran, and it's actually a script for the narrator and the actors to follow, the troubadours. The troubadours follow. I've talked about this on my channel a lot in the past. So, and I've given examples of this kind of Persian theater still being, or it's Arabic, but it's coming from its history is originally Persian theater, street theater. And this, I've given examples of this being performed even to this very day, and exactly the same way in Karbala, in Iraq today. So it's really, really ancient Iraqi tradition.
Okay, well, as well, a couple of thoughts. Now that you said that, and thinking about one of the verses in the Quran, it could be even like the jester, well, the troubadour, but making fun. If he's actually pointing at the ruler and saying, "Oh, ruler, if you divorce your wives, maybe God will give you better wives." It's like maybe there is even like parts of comedy. So I need to
sure. There's a lot of comedy in it. This is the thing, because it's been turned into a religious. I love the Quran. Let me make it the Islamic Quran. Let me make it very, very
comedy
clear.
book.
I absolutely love and adore this because I see it as a performance of a national theater in Iraqi style. I do not believe it as a religious text which has the final say from God to all of mankind, right? But I will defend the Quran at every moment, and I say, well, no, I think it's really precious. This is a national treasure. This has to be preserved. Don't attack this. You might as well be attacking Shakespeare, or you might as well be attacking Beowulf or something like that. These are national treasures which need to be preserved and understood, and even performed to this very day. And I'm totally on board with, that Anthony Hopkins was in a movie where they made a performance of Beowulf, and they changed it, but basically it was roughly the same. And I think that's great because it keeps this ancient national epic again, and it's very similar to the sort of thing the Quran was, but it's an Anglo-Saxon version, and that same sort of thing, not the same content, obviously. And they keep on regurgitating this story again and again in different generations, on street performances, on theater performances, in movies. And I think that's good. You must do that. You have to keep it up to date so people can understand these things. Likewise, Shakespeare. I've seen versions of Shakespeare's plays like Romeo and Juliet where you had Leonardo DiCaprio playing some street gangster in it, and it's keeping it up to date with the modern day, because this is a national treasure and it needs to be, you know, represented to modern audiences again and again. And I think it's an absolute tragedy that the Quran is no longer treated as it was intended to be treated, as a national epic with performances which need to be updated from time to time. And we should have movies of this, and we should have people, you know, acting it out on stage, and there should be musical productions of it, and there should be all sorts of stuff like that to put the Islamic Quran back into its entertainment genre that it was created for. It is insane and ridiculous to be following this book as if it is God's final word to the planet concerning religion. That is as mad as regarding, as I mentioned last week, you know, Dallas Jenkins and his new TV show, The Chosen. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's very popular. It's a version of the story of Jesus, but there's almost no verses, no script from this movie is taken from the New Testament. It's all just the creation of Dallas Jenkins and his team, and it's very evangelical, and it's very much, you know, Jesus is in one scene. They've turned the Sermon on the Mount into this bizarre sort of evangelical sort of stage performance where Jesus is there reciting his speech before he goes on stage out to the crowds, and he does this evangelical sort of presentation to the crowds. And it's like, oh my goodness, this is insane. It's absolutely insane. But and there's no verses in this Dallas Jenkins Chosen TV show which are from the Bible, but you've got a lot of young people who are engaging with that, who are even, you know, people who call themselves Christians and think they believe in the Bible, but they don't know a single verse of the Bible. They call themselves born again Christians, saying, oh yeah, this is the Jesus I believe in, this is the Jesus I love. Dallas Jenkins, The Chosen, this is the Jesus I believe in. And it's complete modern, you know, interpretation of Jesus, inspired by Jesus and inspired by the Gospels, without any correlation to it, because it's just pure entertainment. And that's the same sort of thing that we see in the Quran. It's inspired by these biblical stories, but it's not the biblical story. It's not even intended to be taken as the biblical story. But what has happened is, it's as if, you know, imagine 200 years in the future, Dallas Jenkins' TV show, The Chosen, has become the new Bible. And nobody reads the Bible anymore. They only ever watch Dallas Jenkins' TV show. And when you bring a verse from the Bible to them, they say, oh no, that Bible's been corrupted because the real verses are as presented in Dallas Jenkins' TV show, The Chosen. This is the word of God. Can you imagine? That's exactly what's happened. That is what Islam is. It's a religion built around a TV show.
Yeah, so one observation of something that it is actually very puzzling, and with what you said, actually it explains it clearly, is that the Quran is very lacking of actual details in many things. It's just, it is very lacking of details. But of course, if you are actually watching a performance, you don't need the details, because you know who is character A, who is character B. Yes, exactly. So that would explain why it is so incredibly vague, because they are acting out something. So that actually solves, like, or explains the lack of detail. The other one, would you reckon that then these things are actually put together? And of course, we're talking about 200 years before the whole movement. It becomes basically holy. It's holified, and therefore nothing changes. What do you think happened during that step? Do you think that they removed things that would then contradict the actual belief that they were trying to push? So if, for example, that play was very, very specific about this guy saying these words to that guy, and that contradicts the new narrative, do you think they would have taken them out, or that the text is pretty much what it was?
I think it's pretty much what it was. I think it's pretty much, because the intention was never to replace, when it was written by the people who wrote it, the intention was not to replace the holy liturgies. the intention was try to get people excited about going to find out what the Holy Liturgy said, right? So just exactly the same as Dallas Jenkins has no intention to replace the Bible with his TV show, The Chosen. He wants to get people fired up and interested to investigate the story, the biblical story behind his TV show, right? So there is no need to be verbatim correct. You can be as sloppy as you like in your quotations. You can change the story as Dallas does, you know. He does a whole episode about Mary Magdalene being possessed by demons, and there's nothing in there which is actually taken from the Bible, but except it's inspired by one sentence where it says Jesus cast out several demons from Mary Magdalene, right? That's like literally one sentence from the Bible, and he makes a whole 30-minute or 35-minute show out of this like 5-word sentence, you know. There is nothing true in that show, but it's his inspiration, it's his idea, it's his creativity. Yeah.
Okay, so then from the book that we now have, that explains, well, the lack of detail because they are acting it out. It explains this format of say, they say, and sometimes perhaps the narrator actually addressing the audience and the guy copying it down, doing his very best and in a different language. What do you make of those things that don't seem to fit the narrative, like, for example, with Alexander the Great? Or do you think it was just one story that was floating around? They like it, so they kept it, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with religion because they were two completely different.
Yeah, okay. I think it was a popular story. It was one of the narrations. I think it's a comedy making fun of Alexander the Great. If you read it carefully, it's a comedy making fun of him, you know.
Ridiculous. Right?
It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And you can imagine it being performed. That's why I say there's a lot of comedy in this text. Really. It's I love it. It's really good.
The text that stays then is what we have, and what you have said actually explains a lot, or rather it helps see what the context was. But now, when Umar then does that, and he's trying to get that to push through the empire, wouldn't he at the same time try to get to all of the masjids or synagogues or churches, actual religious text? Would there be a moment in time when he's actually pushing two, one for the masses, one for the, say, religious community in the temples of worship? Do you think there was something like that?
No, let me explain why. He didn't have to. Because the Jewish leadership, or we can say the Sadducee Karaite leadership, which actually achieved this militaristic group, which achieved the conquest with the aid of the Miaphysite believers. The Miaphysite believers were on their side. They basically saw themselves as being liberated from the oppression of the Byzantine Diophysites, right? They saw themselves being liberated from the oppression of the Diaphysite Nestorians as well. They would have been very much on the board with this liberating army coming in and taking their side. We know from Coptic sources that many Copts actually fought alongside the Omar armies where they came in to invade and attack the Byzantines. So he didn't need to sort of push the Miaphysite side, because his Jewish elite, his Sadducean and Karaite militant elite were small in number. The majority of them were already Miaphysites. So he didn't need to. All he needed to try and do was convert his elite to his beliefs. And that is difficult, but if you do it through means of entertainment, then maybe it's going to be easier than converting them with liturgy. So basically, all he had to do was take the side of the masses against the military elite. That's all he had to do. And that is why he got assassinated.
Okay. And then also at that point, actually, even though he tries to convert, say, his followers or some of the elite, there is no such thing as, for example, the Islam that we have today. There is nothing being enforced. Everybody is very free to actually still follow their own beliefs because they're unifying the empire, but there isn't a compulsion in religion per se. Everybody is doing their things.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So then
remember, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please continue.
So then that the actual movement, when do you think would begin the movement on getting these epic stories that are being played out in the theaters and amphitheaters, when does it become a holy book? Is it still late Umayyad, or is it the Abbasids who reinterpret what it is and say, well, now this is our book? It's like the Old Testament or the New Testament or something of the sort. At what point in time do you think that begins?
Yeah, well, certainly the Umayyads were continuing to push this text as a source for trying to convert the elite. That's specifically why Abdul Malik ibn Marwan puts verses from this text around his Dome of the Rock. Okay, now the Dome of the Rock is a sacred space for Jews. It's a sacred place for Jews. It's not sacred for Christians, never has been, of any denomination. But it was always sacred for Jews. And yet, around the Dome of the Rock, on this spot, which was the sacred place for Jews, the place where Abraham is supposed to have sacrificed Isaac and where the temple sacrifice is supposed to take place, all the verses are about Messiah, 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 Messiah. Believe in Messiah, believe in Messiah. So who is he trying to, even Abdul Malik ibn Marwan is trying to convert people, a certain group of people. I should mention another point. Although this is a sacred place for Jews, okay, it is prohibited for the Pharisaical Jews, for the scribes and the Pharisees, to go up there, to go close to that and go to touch it. We're not allowed to, okay? We're not allowed to go to that place. It is not prohibited for Karaites and Sadducees to go to that place, and oftentimes you will find the militant type, Sadducee type, Karaite type Jews always trying to get up there to have access to it, to go and see it. Okay, so this is not changed for 2,000 years. This has always been the case. The only kinds of Jews who are going up there are Jews who reject the scribes and the Pharisees and believe that they should take the land by force. All right, militant Jews. They're the only kinds of Jews who are going up there. So Abdul Malik ibn Marwan puts up his shrine on that spot with all these verses about the Messiah, specifically to convert those militaristic Jews. That's his objective. I don't know if we can say during the time of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan if he is actually intending that by these verses to imply that these are the sacred verses of the new holy book. I don't think we have enough evidence to suggest that, but I do think that that he is responsible for promoting these materials for the sake of unifying the Arab Empire along one line. Perhaps it has its first transition, I will say, its first step of transition from being simple entertainment, from street entertainment, to being actual state-sanctioned propaganda pushing a religious agenda is with the Umayyads, with Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, specifically to convert these Jews, these militaristic Jews, right? That's the first step. But it's not called the Quran during the Umayyad period yet. It's not the Quran. Okay.
Okay.
I think
so.
Yeah.
During up to so. Do you believe that, say, the people that were on this Messianic movement, and just to say some names that we recognize, so Umar is a yes, and then it will be Marwan Muawiyah, Yazid, Abdul Malik, and during that same period, you have Ali, who is of the opposite belief. Then you have Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, who is of the opposite belief.
No.
Is that more or less like the picture that you
No, that's not
paint
the picture.
of?
No, not at all. No. So it's very complex. There are lots of different beliefs going on here, but I should talk a little bit about the origin of these texts themselves. Why are they so like, come on everybody, let's get together. We have something in common and we have a common enemy. This was originally the message of the Hani ibn Qabisa's group, and Hanzala, the author of many of these texts, I think is Hanzala, when they were fighting on the side of Heraclius during that 10-year period from the year 19 until the year 619 to 629, when Heraclius was on his campaign against Khosrau and needed a lot of allies. So the sort of, let's all get together, everybody. It doesn't matter whether you're Jew or Christian or a Sabian. We're believers. We're all together, and God's going to, give us our reward based on our good deeds. And that sort of like kumbaya attitude in the Quran is, let us all unite against the infidel and fight against the infidel, because we have all. It's basically the campaign of Heraclius. Now those texts were then brought in later again. When Omar had taken control, and he wants to try and also kind of make a gel between his militaristic Jewish elite and the Miaphysite population, which are on his side. So that becomes very useful for him in that time. And later, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan sees the value of this in uniting the Arabs, and also if we can get those militaristic Jews converted, that would be very good as well. So it's all very good, but they always need, in each generation, they need to have an enemy who is the unbelieving infidel that we have to fight against. Initially, that is Khosrau and his armies. Then that becomes the Byzantines, and at the time of that's the Byzantines in the time of Omar, and it's also the time exactly with Abdul Malik ibn Marwan as well. Muawiyah and his son Yazid were of a different religion. They were not convinced by this text. Muawiyah was pragmatic. He didn't mind letting this text exist if it keeps Arabs happy as a form of entertainment. But with regards to religion, Muawiyah was extremely pragmatic. He go with whatever worked. He put a cross on one inscription. He allowed his son Yazid very clearly to be totally Persian Zoroastrian in belief. It's absolutely clear that Yazid didn't even regard himself as an Arab. Maybe his mother was a Persian, but Yazid took Arabic off of all the coins and just issued straight, pure Pahlavi Persian coins. He didn't have any Islamic comments or monotheistic Arabic phrases. It was all just basically restoration of a Sasanian style religion. So Yazid was 100% down that path, and would have been allowed to go down that path by his father, who really probably couldn't care less as long as he's got a peaceful empire. The Maronites liked Muawiyah because he was pragmatic, peaceful ruler. They also liked Yazid because Yazid was apparently quite pragmatic and peaceful towards them, even though he was a Persian ruler. But in Persian in religion, but the Miaphysite Arabs totally hated both of those people, and as did the Jews. Certainly hated Yazid when Yazid turned the Temple Mount into what we call a Kabe Zartosht, which means a Zoroastrian shrine. He built a Kabe Zartosht on that holy mountain. On the holy mountain, the Jews were certainly furious. The militaristic Jews were certainly furious about that. Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr is the grandson of Abu Bakr as-Sadiq, the Sadducee. He's the grandson of the Sadducee. He's certainly a Sadducee too. And that's why Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr burns down Yazid's Kabe Zartosht, which has been built on the Temple Mount, and takes the black stone, which is actually the Elagibulus, the Beth El stone, the black stone that Jacob slept on and had the dream of the vision of the ladder, Jacob's ladder, which was kept by the kings of Israel, and they built their own shrine around that black stone, the Beth El stone, which we call later the Elagibulus. That stone was being, in the Sadducee mind, was being defiled by the Kabe Zartosht, which was built on the Temple Mount by Yazid. So he burnt down that and took the black stone with him to his area. Right. So we've got different things going on. You've got three major things. One is this Miaphysite belief, right? Two is this militaristic Sadducean Karaite belief. Three is the Persian religion, okay? And you can say four is a pragmatist view of, let's just try and keep peace in the empire, please, right? So it's not as straightforward as one would like it to be. But there are two fundamental factions. There is the center of the Miaphysite, let's all unite against the infidel, where the Jews are being encouraged to unite with the Miaphysites. The center of that is certainly in Hira in Iraq, and Hani ibn Qabisa's party, which was also including Hanzala, the author of many of these things, is based there. And that party gets eliminated, eradicated by Yazid. Yazid sees that party as a threat, and he eradicates them. He totally destroys their leadership, kills them all. And Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr sees the opportunity to take control at that point and lead a revolution against Yazid. But he's not successful. He's not brave enough. He's not strong enough. His army is not powerful enough. And so he basically just captures the stone and takes it back to the east. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan comes along later and says, right, well, I got to unify all these people. And he comes from the camp, the Muawiyah camp. He comes from the Maronite camp. Ibn Marwan means son of Maron. Maron is a Maronite name. So he's definitely coming from that Maronite camp. And he basically unifies them with his own version of a religion, of Islam, which he is using these national epic performances, these narrations. He's using them to unify his people. To what extent that is the central holy text of his empire, I don't know. Probably quite significant, but not necessarily the only text. Maybe it was the only text, but it certainly was not called the Quran in his lifetime, neither in the Umayyads dynasty. By the time the Abbasids come along, the Abbasids are the first who start, not at first, but later, the Abbasids are the ones who start calling this collection of theatrical performances, they start calling it the Quran. Now, that's already more than 100 years on from the translation. It's almost 150 years on from the translation of the original Syriac Qur'an into the first Arabic Quran. Okay.
Well, actually, I think I would, if you're up for it, I would really love to speak in detail about your thoughts, particularly with the whole Muawiyah, Ali, and what happened after. But I think that deserves a whole conversation. So if you are up for it, we can do it another time.
Not now? Okay. Okay.
Because we have the last 20 minutes left before you need to go. So
no, I've got time. I've got time. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I could go up until it's 12 this time here where I am, so I can go up until 1 o'clock. Yeah.
Okay. So just thinking, going say back to Umar, Ali, and that whole, well, that period of time when there is so much conflict, and it does actually fit, even according to the narrative, that Umar is the kind of guy that would get assassinated by his political opponents as opposed to just by some random guy. That would certainly make a lot of sense. But just thinking then about, even though religion is actually not, it is important to the rulers, but there is no Islam, there is not a unified text or anything of the sort. So it's all a little bit up in the air. But what are your thoughts as to particularly Umar and Ali? What are their sacred books? Do they go to the synagogue? Do they pray? In what manner? What is their actual beliefs that they follow? And probably Ali is consistent with his beliefs, and Umar, of course, changes. Does he go from being at the synagogue to go to an actual church? Or how do you think they express their beliefs in that sense?
So, as I said, I think Omar ibn al-Khattab was originally a Karaite, and that I would say that would be Ibn al-Kitab was his original sort of designation, I think, epithet. So I think he was originally a Karaite, and so they would go to a Karaite synagogue, which is very much like a masjid. A Karaite synagogue and an Islamic masjid are very, very similar. There's one in Ashdod in Israel. I've been there. I've prayed in that place. And you pray like a Muslim. There are no chairs, no seats. You use like prayer mats, carpets on the floor, and you have to wash. You have to purify yourself before you go. It's very much like a masjid, very much like a mosque. That's the Karaite way of worship. So there wouldn't have been much difference between the way he would have worshipped and the way Muslims worship today as a Karaite. And I don't think there was probably much change. But he was converted to this Miaphysite belief. Now, I had said last week, and I'll reiterate it again, that the emergence of the Oriental Orthodox Church was in that century in competition against the emergence of Islam, or I say Umayyad Islam, as it emerged with Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. So there was a competition to absorb these Miaphysite believers who were much more loose and disorganized than modern Islam, and loose and disorganized than the Oriental Orthodox Church. When Omar was converted to these Miaphysite beliefs is when the competition sort of took off to see which direction can we sway Omar in. He's the major person, so which direction can we sway him in? The Oriental Orthodox Church starts to emerge at that time to try and be organized, and I think it was probably very much tied to Omar in trying to organize itself as a kind of a proper state religion, which Omar would then hope to be the church of his empire. But he died, and that faction with him died, and that faction becomes the Oriental Orthodox Church as we know it today, with patriarchs and everything as we know it. Then you have, on the other side, Islam emerging, where you have the masjid culture emerging, which is very much an imitation of the original Karaite system, which is probably a continuation of the less Oriental Orthodox influenced Karaites who had gone along with the street performances, who enjoyed the entertainment, and many of the Miaphysite believers went down that way and became what we call Muslims today. But the camp of Hani ibn Qabisa and Hanzala is where I believe the Quran was originally, the original materials which became the Islamic Quran, I should say, the Ashana al-Hadith, were from that camp, from the Ali, which is the Hani ibn Qabisa camp, where Hanzala was important author of those materials. Abu Turab, that is Hani himself, was an important author of those materials at a later date. And after that, I also think that, or maybe contemporary with that, maybe before or after that, we also have this Solomon the Pharisee, who is an important Pharisee who is involved in that movement. And those are the Noahides as we understand them in Orthodox Judaism. That's what we call the Gerim, the Meshulamim. This is the in Hira in South Iraq. That is the Miaphysite Noahide central point in the province that we call Orientalis. And that's the old Roman name for the area, Orientalis, as opposed to Mesopotamia. Yeah.
No, you just mentioned Salman al-Farisi or Salman the Pharisee.
Yeah.
So it would actually make sense that he went down in history with that name, because he would be the one sticking out from the others who were Karaites, Sadducees, and he is a Pharisee.
Yes.
So that would actually make sense why they would record him in that manner.
That's right, because Abu Bakr as-Sadiq, the Sadducee, Umar ibn al-Khattab, al-Kitab, the Ibn al-Kitab meaning the Karaite, Salman al-Fars, the Pharisee. So they've been given their designations. They're like screaming out behind the scenes to us, telling us the whole picture. If we just listen to the epithets which have been given to them, these are representing different camps of people. Abu Bakr as-Sadiq's camp, from which comes Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, is the Sadducee camp. Al-Kitab's camp are the basic Karaites who become the Muslims in the end. Then we have al-Farsi's camp, the Pharisees' camp, are the Messianic Noahides, the Miaphysite Noahides surrounding, and it's from the Pharisee camp with Hani ibn Qabisa, which is Abu Turab, and Hanzala, which is the Emir. This is where the Quran emerges. That's why the Quran is absolutely 100% a Miaphysite text. But despite it being a Miaphysite Noahide text, which has, it appeals to the brotherhood of mankind and the unity of the children of Noah. It mentions the Sharia of Noah in chapter 42. It mentions the Miaphysite belief that God did not adopt a son. He did not itihad a son, which is an Nestorian belief, or it is a diophysite belief, but it is absolutely not a miaphysite belief. It actually even has this verse, inna yakun lahu walid, which means indeed there is to him a son, which of course the modern Qurayshi Arabic interprets that sentence in a completely different way. It says, yes, literally it says indeed there is a son, but it actually means no, there isn't a son, some kind of bizarre Arabic rule which they've invented to try and explain away that embarrassing verse in the Quran. But it's absolutely a miaphysite Noahide text. Okay, it's absolutely a miaphysite Noahide text, but it gets adopted because it's popular with the Arabs. It's a good entertainment, it's good fun entertainment, and if you just are accepting it with entertainment, you don't actually have to understand the theology behind it. The theology is important if there is going to be pushed a religion which is going to push a kind of a miaphysite Noahide belief. But if the leaders of that camp are destroyed, as they were by Yazid, Yazid destroys that camp, then you've got no leadership. The poems still exist, but you can now use these poems to mean anything. Look at this. Christianity, most commonly people say, like, Christianity is a religion where basically you believe that God sent his only son to be sacrificed for your sins, so that your sins, you are no longer guilty of any of your sins. Your sins are cleared because all of your sins were carried by that human sacrifice, or God's deicide, which took place where this human was killed for your sins. So you know, be happy, be free. But now, if you go to try and find exactly that doctrine in the New Testament, you can't find that doctrine in the Bible. The Bible is the book of the Christians, but that doctrine doesn't exist in the Bible. That doctrine is something which claims to be backed up by the Bible, but you can use the Bible again and again to undermine that doctrine and say, no, that's not the case. Sorry to the Christians listening, that's just not the case. Likewise, you don't need to have the same religion as described in the Quran to be able to use the Quran to back up your faith, because most people, just like most Christians, are not going to read their holy text. They're going to believe what you tell them is their text, and especially if you give them a big giant book and say, and here is the book to prove it, they're going to say, here's the book to prove it, the Bible proves it. But it doesn't prove it. It actually undermines your faith. So that doctrine, I should say, not as undermine your faith, it undermines your doctrine. Likewise, the Quran undermines the Islamist doctrine. Nevertheless, a group of diophysites, Nestorians, took on the Quran, the Islamic Quran, because it was very popular, and they claimed that it backed up their Nestorian view. So Islam, the religion, is more Nestorian, whereas the Quran, the text, is completely anti-Nestorian. It doesn't matter that it's anti-Nestorian, because it doesn't matter that the Bible is disagreeing with the Christian doctrine. It doesn't matter. As long as you just say a lie enough times, it becomes the truth. That's even Stalin knew that.
And then you enforce it as much as possible. And actually, as well, now thinking about then the whole mess that would have been in this emerging empire, there would have been so many religions, beliefs, heresies. Nobody would disagree. If you would try to actually impose one, you're going to have 90% of the kingdom against you. But if you have this one thing that everybody agrees on because it's good fun, it's an actual performance, that people would just, become very, very accustomed to that. Also, people would probably really be drawn towards that because it's the form of entertainment. So that makes a lot of sense. As well, when you say about Salman, it makes sense that when they are then writing or rewriting history, they try to remove him as much as possible, but he's well known. So they just change him from being a Pharisee to being a Persian. They get lucky with that. One thing that also, I don't know if you actually read anything into this, it's in their tradition, so you cannot believe anything, and the whole story of Salman in their traditions is made up and all over the place, but they attach him with confirming the prophethood of their prophet by saying he's the one that sees this and says, oh yes, you see, that's the prophet. So do you think that he had any kind of role in the creation of the whole thing, perhaps being the one that comes up with an idea of not in the Quran, but maybe outside of it, of having an actual prophet of their own, just because in their traditions, Salman is attached, I think, in 2 or 3 different places as being the one that confirms Muhammad being a prophet. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, we're going to get into a little bit into the nitty-gritty detail of the beliefs of the Quran and the Salman Farisi Hani ibn Qabisa Hanzala group, which is in South Iraq, in Hira, right? But the word Muhammad, as we talked about in the last episode, last week, okay, the word Muhammad itself was already in use 100 years before Islam is supposed to have emerged. It was already in use in the Himyarite kingdom, which is a Pharisaical Orthodox Jewish kingdom in South Yemen, and it refers to the Messiah, okay, an appearance of the Messiah, the angelic Messiah, who accompanied. We call in Hebrew, in Judaism, we call him Sar Hapanim. Now, you because of the hegemony of Islam and because of the hegemony of Christianity, right? There are 2 billion Muslims, there are 2 billion Christians in the world. 4 billion people pushing a particular view of Judaism. Everybody thinks that Judaism is the way as described by those 4 billion people. That's not. This is the biggest struggle. There's 17 million Jews, and most of those Jews don't know what Judaism is about. So we've got a very difficult time trying to explain Judaism to people. They say the first thing you'll hear about, well, Jews, they don't believe in the Messiah. Right? Well, that's completely bogus for a start. The concept of Messiah is a Jewish concept. We totally believe in the Messiah. The question is, do we believe that the Messianic era has begun and that the rule of the Messiah is here and we're all living in paradise? And the answer is no, we absolutely do not believe that we're all living in paradise and that, that this is Olam Haba, this is the world to come. And that is misconstrued as we don't believe in the Messiah. We do believe in the Messiah. And another way it's misconstrued is because, well, you don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth is Messiah. What we should say is, because most of us don't recognize that the idea that Jesus of Nazareth was an appearance of our divine Messiah, they say that we don't believe in the divine Messiah. That's not true. Our divine Messiah, as described in our liturgies from Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and all the way through our prayers, which we do in the Amidah, which we do 3 times a day, every day, it's very, very clear that we have a divine Messiah, okay, who is the salvation that we wait for, the Davidic salvation that we wait for, okay? And the name given to this divine Messiah in Kabbalah, in many midrashim, it's not actually a name, it's a description given to him, is Sar Hapanim. Sar Hapanim. Now, sometimes you come across a group of Jews like the Chabadniks or the Breslovers or some other Hasidic sect who will say that the founder of their yeshiva is the Messiah. Like the Chabadniks, many of them say that Menachem Schneerson is the Messiah. Okay, and that's very normal thing in Judaism. It's not means that they're not a different sect. They're not a new religion or anything. They are part of Judaism. And what does this mean? It means they believe that Menachem Schneerson was actually an appearance of that same Jewish Messiah, Sar Hapanim, that we believe in. Okay, that's the position. So we have a lot of texts which talk about this divine Messiah, Sar Hapanim. We have a lot of them. And in the Himyar kingdom, they called this Messiah, they called him Mahmad or Muhammad. Okay. And this is actually a biblical name for him, which comes from the Song of Solomon. It's a Song of Songs, I should say, chapter 5, verse 16. And it's also in Ezekiel. It's also mentioned in Ezekiel. Okay. So we have this concept of the divine Messiah and being basically God's representative on earth, or in the creation, and he appears in different ways, as different things. He appears as a burning bush. In Judaism, we refer to the Spirit of God which hovered over the waters in the beginning. This is also the soul of the Messiah, right there in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. Right there, we've got the Messiah being referred to there. It's a little bit more complicated because there's actually 3 parts to this Messiah, and there's 2 parts of that Messiah, which are mentioned in Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. But I won't get into that now. There's a kind of a central figure, and there's a piece, one on the right hand, and there's one on the left hand, and two of those are mentioned in that verse. These same three beings, or actually one being in three aspects, appears to Abraham in the book of Genesis, at Mamre, when Abraham has been circumcised. These three appear to him there, and he has a discussion with him. He refers to them, and he calls them the Lord. He actually uses a sacred name in Judaism to refer to them. He refers to them in the sacred name. So we have a concept of Sar HaPanim appearing in the creation throughout history, throughout the Jewish history, throughout the Jewish story. The only question which the 2 billion Christians and the 2 billion Muslims are getting wrong in presenting to the world, presenting our religion to the world, and also the ignorant Jews also, unfortunately, getting wrong in the way they present it, is saying that we don't believe that the Messiah has come. What they're actually saying is, we don't believe that Jesus of Nazareth was an appearance of Sar HaPanim for the Jews, and we do not believe that just even if he did appear for the Jews at that time, that now we are living in some kind of paradise kingdom for the last 2,000 years, that the world has become a paradise because he appeared. We do not believe such things. That is not our belief. And so they say, in order to undermine our position, they say that that we reject the Messiah, we reject Jesus, we don't believe in Messiah, we don't believe. Okay, so first things first, I hope I managed to clarify. We do believe in the divine Messiah. Sar HaPanim is our Messiah. There are many people, many Jews throughout history who have claimed that the founder of their yeshiva is an appearance of that divine Messiah, Sar HaPanim. And there is, in fact, nothing wrong with believing that Jesus of Nazareth was another appearance of that same Sar HaPanim in order to establish a yeshiva for the nations and the lost sheep of the house of Israel. There's totally nothing wrong with that. There is plenty wrong to say that he established a yeshiva for the Kehillah, because there is no Kehillah yeshiva established by him. But if you want to say, well, no, he was the Messiah for the nations, and he established a movement for the nations, Judaism has been saying that for a long time. 2,000 years we've been saying, yeah, that's right. For the nations he was, not for us. But if you want to say he was appearance of the Messiah for the nations, yeah, no problem. That's okay. He was appearance of Sar HaPanim for the nations. Fine, no problem. So we don't reject that. And one of the names for this is Muhammad. Okay, so that's a bit of a long introduction to the thing, but I had to get this very clear. So Salman Farsi is absolutely on board with this view that I have just presented to you. And mere Pharisite Christians are completely capable of being Noahides under the umbrella of what we call Universal Judaism or Noahide Judaism, Judaism for all, which is one of the it's like the layers of Orthodox Judaism. Orthodox Judaism has a central heart, a central core, which is called Kehillah Judaism. Noahides are not inside of Kehillah Judaism, and Jesus of Nazareth has no role to play inside of Kehillah Judaism. But then when you go on the outer layer of Orthodox Judaism, Judaism for all, Universal Judaism, Noahide Judaism, then yeah, Jesus of Nazareth has a role to play there, and there's totally nothing wrong for mere Pharisees to be Noahides and believe that Jesus of Nazareth is Messiah for the nations. This is totally fine. So now, what about Nabi? Okay, does the Nabi then refer to Jesus of Nazareth, or does it refer to somebody else? It doesn't refer to Jesus of Nazareth. It doesn't refer to Muhammad even, because Muhammad, the word Muhammad, in this context, in this Solomon the Pharisee context, is a word for the Jewish Messiah and his role specifically as described appearing for the nations, right? So that would be a reference to Jesus of Nazareth in this mere Pharisite Noahide group, all right? So Muhammad is just another word for referring to Jesus as the Messiah. Nabi, as I said, is just a reference to the Nabatean leaders who are on board with the Pharisee movement. Why? Because the son of Ishmael, Nabatea, Nebi, is this singular. Nebiot means plural form. Nebiot means prophecy. And Nabi is also the root word for Nabatean, right? Nebiot, the son of Ishmael, is basically the leader of the Noahides in Judaism. He's basically represents the leader of the Noahides. So the reference to the Nabi is a reference to the Nebiot as a leader of Noahides, okay, a Noahide leader. So again, this is only from a Pharisaical point of view. This leader is also called a Petah Chamor, which means the firstborn donkey. If you remember, Ishmael is referred to as a donkey. And so his firstborn son, Nebiot, is the firstborn donkey, the Petah Chamor, which is what this podcast is called, the Petah Chamor podcast. Okay, so it's another way of saying the Nabi podcast. This is the Nabi speaking, right? The Petah Chamor speaking, the firstborn donkey speaking, right? So this is a reference. All of this is only Pharisaical Judaism. Rashi talks about it. The Tosafists talk about it. This is rabbinical, Pharisaical, Talmudic Judaism. This cannot be mistaken for any other kind of Judaism. It cannot be mistaken for Sadducee. It cannot be mistaken for Karaite. This is only within this oral tradition, right? So all of these concepts are part of the Solomon the Pharisee camp. Now, I know I went on a long time and about that to try and clarify that. I wonder if I managed to make a little bit clearer the picture of the Salmon camp, the Salmon Hani and Hanzala camp, and what their beliefs would be focused on.
Yeah, but I think maybe if it would be good to have as well a conversation where we maybe focus on him, seeing as he's one of the three guys that is mentioned by Leo III. Maybe we zero in on him like exclusively if you want to actually have another conversation about these things. Also, I know that you said you have time, but I also don't want you to rush. So I don't want to start any particular topic that then we have to rush through or anything of the sort. So you can just say, wrap up any topic that you want. I do have one question to see if you have any thoughts about this, because it's been bugging me, and we can leave it in whichever spot you think is the right place where to stop. Is Saint Murad was having a live stream yesterday, so I actually jumped in there because I noticed that in his translation there is one thing that appears 5 times in the book, which is in his translation. It's Allah, Allahumma. And I said, why is that there? And he doesn't say translated. And he laughed, he chuckled a bit and said, well, if you play with the diacritical marks, it actually reads Elohim in 5 different places, which, you know, I wonder if you actually have thought about that. He chuckled, I chuckled, and I found it quite an interesting word to find because of his translation.
I think it's a way of directly addressing, because you've got this you can't directly address the word Allah. It means the divinity, or the divine. Actually, it means the divine. La is like the root of ilaha, which is a god, so it's a deity or divinity. So when you say Allah, it's actually collision. There is an aleph in there. They draw it as a little crown over the double L. So it's actually al-ilaha, the divinity, the God. If you take away the crown, it still says Allah, but there's no aleph there. You can say it's implied, and it can say the divinity. But the point is, you don't talk to somebody and call call that person the something, right? You can't say to somebody, hello, the operator. You can say hello, operator, and that's the same in Arabic too. You would take away, if you were talking to the person directly, you would not use the definite article. You would use it without a definite article, and you would give them that title as their name, right? So you could say, oh ilaha, meaning oh God, but you can't say oh al ilaha, oh the God. It doesn't make sense. So you need to have some suffix attached to that to make it into something which means you can now direct it. You can put it into what's called like a vocative case. And so that basically is like saying, oh, you who are the God, which is like saying, Ya Allahumma. Okay, oh, you who are the God. Okay, now, whether this is Elohim, which is very attractive, to say so. It's still got the problem of the double aleph there, not the double lamed there. And we don't have any cases where Elohim is with a double lamed, except when we refer to El Elohim is El Elohim, or we wouldn't say Elohim, we would say Eloi Israel, okay, which means El, God of Israel. Okay, so you could say that you can refer to El, God of Israel, which is a verse which it appears in the book of Genesis, and that case in Allah or Al Ilaha would be El, God. Okay, and then Huma again means you who are El, God, like a suffix which is making it an evocative case, and that really is the only correlation I would say with the double lamed. So I would say this is not a good what can I say, a good stick to lean on, right? It's not a good stick to lean on and say, look, Allahumma is equivalent to Elohim. This is not strong. This is weak. This is very weak. You can break it very easily with just the arguments very simply saying the double lamed in no case ever anywhere occurs with regards to Elohim. It does occur with Eloah. We got a double lamed there, but it's not in Elohim. So the huma here suffix is a vocative case, and that's a Judeo-Arabic. So that makes sense with a Judeo-Arabic vocative case, and it would mean that Allah would be El, God, as referred to in the book of Genesis, where it says El, God of Israel.
Great. Actually, I hope that you managed to do some work about that with Saint Murad. So
hopefully,
because some of those things, they just kind of like
Judeo-Arabic translation of the Quran.
Weird.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hopefully. I hope we will be working together with a Judeo-Arabic translation of the Quran, but that's years away. And what he's done right now is very, very valuable. But it basically just shows that if you use standard Arabic or Qurayshi Arabic to try and translate this, it doesn't make sense. The Quran is not written in Qurayshi Arabic. It's written in some dialect of Arabic, clearly, but it's not written in Qurayshi Arabic. And my argument is it's Judeo-Arabic. And if we go down that path with the Judeo-Arabic sort of approach, you'll find that it does make an awful lot of sense. Even the name Allah makes perfect sense.
Okay, well, that's great. I will look forward to seeing. If you ever have any kind of like shows with him, if you could actually give me a heads up, I'll make sure actually I tune in as well, because it would be really, really, I mean, it is a big part of how everything actually began. Actually, in terms of Umar, or just actually taking back to Umar, do you know what languages, seeing as he was in Jerusalem, probably fighting with the Persians, and then he ended up in Yemen, and then he went back. Do you have any ideas as to, he wouldn't speak Aramaic based on the whole thing about his sister.
Yeah, he probably spoke Arabic. I think it was only Arabic. Arabic-speaking Jews are very common. Even in Israel today, you find many Arabic-speaking Jews. And when they came to Israel, when they made Aliyah to Israel in the first place, when they were running away from Iraq and Yemen and Morocco and various places like that, when they were coming, they couldn't speak Hebrew. Hebrew is a language of prayer. And it's supposed to be a language of prayer. It's a holy language. It's become a spoken language, a modern language in the state of Israel, but it was never really a language of anything other than prayer for the Jews. And we're not supposed to profane it by using it for any other purpose except prayer. We're not actually, in Orthodox Judaism, according to the scribes and the Pharisees, you're not actually supposed to use Hebrew language to speak and have a conversation in. You're only supposed to use Hebrew language for praying to God in. That's all, and for studying, obviously, the Holy Scriptures. So there was no need for him to speak Hebrew, even if he prayed in Hebrew. There was no need for him even to understand Hebrew. There are plenty of people who pray in Hebrew, plenty of Jews who pray in Hebrew without really understanding it, right? They learn to read a passage in Hebrew for their bar mitzvah, and then after that, they continue to pray in Hebrew. But they don't necessarily know the meaning of anything except for that little passage which they studied during their bar mitzvah. This is very common in Judaism. Except in the land of Israel, of course, today, because they have resurrected Hebrew as a conversational language. But that's problematic because the Hebrew they speak in the state of Israel today is not biblical Hebrew. It is not liturgical Hebrew, and it is very many differences. For example, I'll give you a solid example of how you can understand how different the Hebrew spoken in Israel is. And you should never believe anybody just because say, I'm an Israeli, I speak Hebrew, or I lived in Israel all these years and I speak Hebrew fluently. You should never believe them that they understand anything about religion just because they speak modern Hebrew. Here's an example. Because as I said, this word mahmad in the biblical Hebrew is a reference to the temple, to the holy place where God's presence dwells, right? It is the treasure of Israel. It is the beloved thing of Israel, mahmad. In modern Hebrew, it means a pet, like a pet dog or a pet cat. Mahmad means pet, all right? This is extremely different in the meaning, totally different words, right? One is the indwelling of God, the place where God dwells on earth is the mahmad. And in modern Hebrew, it's your dog, it's your budrigar, it's your hamster, it's your cat. Do you see the difference? This is a totally different language. Do not confuse modern Hebrew with that. So likewise, the point of me making here is Omar didn't speak and didn't have to speak Hebrew. He didn't have to understand Aramaic or Syriac. He could have just simply spoken Arabic only. That's totally normal. Judeo-Arabic probably, but yeah.
Yeah, we got the whole thing started. Actually, some of the things that you've described, it looked like either Islam copied later, or it was kind of like transferred, because you said about, for example, well, remembering or praying in a specific language. That's actually what Muslims do to this day. Not many of them speak Arabic, but they need to actually recite in Arabic because that's the only language that Allah understands for some reason. So it looks almost as if there was level of influence from that tradition, either that or later on they just copied because they wanted to give themselves legitimacy. But perhaps that's something and a conversation for some other time, where we can see these parallels and decide if they simply copied it from either Judaism or other religions later, or if they were there from the beginning and they just morphed and evolved into some of the things that the Islam does even to this day. But maybe that's a longer conversation, and we were just focusing on the Quran, which is the interesting thing. So
yeah, we can go through all these things as much as you like, as much as you want to come on and talk about these things. I think it's a good idea. We can record our conversation and go through them as much as you like to clarify any point. Do you have a time limit? Do you have to go now?
No, I'm just really conscious of your time, and I don't want you to actually be rushing or anything. So,
all right. Thank you so much. So, well, we'll probably, let me just see if have we covered the Quran origins, the Islamic Quran origins today? Have I made it clear, as I failed to do so on Al-Fadi's show, as I failed to do so on Jay Smith's show? Have I made it clear now what we're talking about with the Quran, which was collected by Omar, given to Hafsa, which I believe is the Amr Masjid Codex, and how that thing became the Islamic Quran, how that is very different from the Quran, which was given by Gabriel to Omar? Have I made it very clear?
Well, it's been very clear to me. I don't know if for people listening, they actually understood it. To me, it's starting to make sense. But one of the reasons is not say that you didn't explain it correctly the first time, is that we have heard the standard narrative so many times that trying to be able to look at it, say, with fresh eyes and look at it as a different thing, it takes time. The brain is very reluctant to actually see these things. But just about the things that you said, okay, so the lack of detail in the Quran is because they are acting out the things in the real world. That makes sense. All of these weird structures of speaking in the first person. Okay, now that makes sense. And one party saying one thing, another party saying another thing. That makes sense. Addressing maybe the caliph or the ruler or something. That makes sense. Now I have to actually take that, have a look at the Quran with this through that new lens, and say, okay.
And imagine people acting out a scene, miming it next to a narrator while he's speaking it as well, so it gives more context.
Yeah,
I'm going to.
so that's
I
actually
promised.
what I need to do.
Yeah, that's what you have to do, and hopefully, maybe one day we'll get to the point where this will be so demystified that people can actually start performing Quran performance, and we might be able to see YouTube videos of people performing Quran passages, because I think it's what people need to start seeing in order to. I wanted to do it with, if there's any cartoonists or animators out there who want to do this with me. I've been wanting to do this a very long time, to animate these scenes from the Quran so that people can see it. Or if you know an animator, please contact them, ask them to get in touch with me, redjudaism@gmail.com, because I really want to make a couple of videos about this so that people can see how the Quran is supposed to have been performed. It's the only way to understand it, otherwise it doesn't make sense. So please do. I did promise to show this. I'll put it on the screen now, because I did promise to show this. This is a couple of pages from the Amr Masjid Codex, which I say is the copy which was held by Hafsa, the daughter of Omar. This is an example of, I don't have it very nice quality. It's not a very nice detail picture right now, unfortunately, because I had a problem with the deletion of many of my images. But this is from an earlier presentation where I did that. And I've actually gone through these 2 pages on this channel, and I have translated word by word every single word on this, and I've shown the difference between this and what the modern Islamic Quran is. Not too much difference, but there are significant differences. This is 2 pages of Hafsa's, that's Omar's daughter, copy. I believe this is Hafsa's copy, the original Mus'haf held by Hafsa in her house in Fustat. I believe that's where she was. The Amr Masjid is where they found this, and that is the As-Sana al-Hadith. These are 2 pages of the As-Sana al-Hadith, which became the Islamic Quran. All right, so I promised that I would show that, and I've shown that now. You've probably seen this before, and that's scattered all over the world nowadays, because there are bits of it in St. Petersburg, there are bits of it in Paris, there are bits of it in Egypt, I think, there are bits of it in the Vatican, there are bits of this all over the place, but we have quite a lot of it, enough to, and this is definitely the oldest. There is nothing older than this. This is the oldest. Forget the Sana manuscripts, okay? Sana is from the time of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, okay? Forget that. This is the original stuff. So, yeah, I promised I should, and I've shown that now. And this has got nothing to do with the Arabic Quran. Yeah.
Yeah, before, when it finally actually clicked, the whole performance, street performance, the first thing that really then jumped into my head is like, oh my goodness, someone has to do that like in cartoon form. Unfortunately, that's not something, I don't know any cartoonist, and even on my channel, the stuff that I put to actually put questions and make people think about the Quran and what it says and so on, the production value is like quite low. This is not my area of expertise. I wish I had those skills, and I could tell you, hey, let's take these passages and put them in a visual form that people can see how then it makes sense.
Yeah.
But certainly, I really hope that someone who has those skills is actually listening to this, and then they reach out to you, because it needs to be done.
Please, God. So if you know an animator, please get them in touch with me. I'm waiting for my children to learn how to animate so they can do it, but that's a few years away. So I can't do it. It's not my area of expertise, not my skill. And I'm looking forward to working with an animator on this. This is my project. This is what I would love to do. There is some money available as well for this. There are lots of people who are willing to put up a little bit of money for this as a project. So yeah, I'll put some money forward for that. So so it's not necessarily going to be doing it for absolute free. There will be some payment, but if any of you know an animator who's willing to work on this, then please put them in touch with redjudaism@gmail.com, and let's see if we can start doing this, at least some passages, so that people can start to see how it is. Okay, and we can keep you anonymous as well. You don't have to be famous. If you're afraid of your name being known, we can keep you completely anonymous, if you like. All right, and so we've done that. We've done the origins of the Quran. The timing in which the Islamic Quran starts to be called Islamic Quran is after the religion that Omar wanted has become the Oriental Orthodox Church, which still preserves the Arabic the original Arabic Quran is still preserved in the Oriental Orthodox Church around the world today. So not every church has one, but there are places which are under the jurisdiction of Oriental Orthodox churches which have copies of the original Arabic Quran given by Gabriel of Khartoum to the Emir, and that is nothing to do with the Islamic Quran which we have, which is the Ahsan al-Hadith. I'll just give you some to help you understand. I'll give you an example. After a little prayer at the beginning of the Arabic Quran, the first paragraph is Romans, the book of Romans, the letter of the Epistle to the Romans, chapter 5, verses 1 to 5. The next paragraph is the Epistle to Romans, chapter 6, verses 3 to 11. The third is letter to Romans, chapter 8, verses 2 to 11. The fourth is Romans 9, 30 to 10. The fifth is 2 Corinthians 5, 14 to 6. The sixth section is Ephesians chapter 1, verses 17 to 2. The seventh is Ephesians 2, 4 to 10. The eighth is Ephesians 2, 13 to 22. The ninth is Ephesians 3, 14 to 21. And the 10th is Philippians 2, 5 to 11. And it goes through like this, all the way through. You get Timothy, you get Isaiah, you get everything. Just go through one passage after another passage after another passage of the Bible. And that is not what the Islamic Quran is like at all. It's a totally different book. So when you have heard people like Christoph Luxemburg and talking about, oh yes, it was a Syriac lectionary, you haven't understood what a Syriac lectionary is. The Islamic Quran is nothing like a Syriac lectionary. Nothing like. But this is because they've missed the point. You know, I know that Christoph Luxemburg used to join in with a discussion forum called The Rope. I was in it, he was in it. And then later that turned into something called the Ultimate Bulletin Board on a channel called freeminds.org, which is run from Saudi Arabia. We used to discuss there, and he missed the point. He simply missed the point. And he went and thought, oh, right, yes, the Ahsan al-Hadith is the Syriac lectionary. No. But what was revealed by Gabriel what was given by Gabriel to Omar was a translation of the Syriac lectionary. 2 different books. And at some point along the line, and you will find also there are passages in the Ahsan al-Hadith which are lifted from the liturgy, not from the lectionary. Those passages which are in the liturgy are also in the lectionary. Those passages which are lifted from the liturgy for the Ahsan al-Hadith are only similar to passages from the lectionary because they're both lifted from the same sources. You understand what I mean? So they're lifted from the liturgy because these were mere Thaisites, and their beliefs were organized into the Oriental Orthodox Church eventually, and so the Oriental Orthodox Church is taking from the same sources, right? But that doesn't mean it's a direct borrowing from the lectionary into the Ahsan al-Hadith. Okay, so there are 2 different books here, and the Ahsan al-Hadith eventually replaced the translation of this Qur'an. It replaced the Arabic Quran. It replaced the Arabic Quran so that no Muslim in the world anywhere today follows the Arabic Quran. Neither do they read it. And the only places where the Arabic Quran is preserved are in the Oriental Orthodox churches, because they, with the end of Omar's sort of conversion and his mission and his plan, that was the end of the importance of the Arabic Quran among the Arabic Caliphate. That was the end. And by the time the Islamic Quran had become the Quran, that means by the time the Ahsan al-Hadith had become the Islamic Quran, nobody knew what the Arabic Quran was anymore. So when the Ahsan al-Hadith is referring to the Arabic Quran, which was well known in the early 7th century, okay, or at least in the 740s, it was well known. When the Ahsan al-Hadith is referring to the Arabic Quran, there was a question because there was no longer any knowledge about what is this Arabic Quran. And so the answer came back very simply, well, the Ahsan al-Hadith must be the Arabic Quran. And that's when the Ahsan al-Hadith became known as the Quran. Before that time, it wasn't known as the Quran. I know it's difficult because I'm using the word Quran a lot, and it's with two different meanings. And I do hope that if you have a question about this, you will post your question under the video and say, look, can you clarify this part for me? I didn't understand what you were saying at that point. And I'll try to make it clear. But eventually, hopefully, you'll get in your brain this idea, or your brains, this idea that there are two things which are called the Quran here. One is the Islamic Quran, and the other is the Arabic Quran. And these are two completely different books. All right, I hope that that's clear. All right, then, I think we did it. Did we do it?
I think we did it. I think it sounds good. Maybe actually next time that we speak, if there are any questions that people post about, can you clarify this or that, maybe you can actually pick it up from there, give a summary so that everybody's on the same page. And then we either continue with the actual history of these people, or maybe we even delve in more detail, because this is like exceedingly interesting. And yeah, I just don't know where we can take it actually next time, because I'm really interested about the history and what was happening with these people.
Yeah.
And I'm equally interested about the actual book, how it went from basically two different stories into changing the names and then the beginning of the religion. So plenty to discuss. And as I said, if you are happy to have other conversations, we can pick it up next week.
We will.
And
we should try and think, okay, well, let's have an idea which one, what should we try to focus on next week? Because there's a lot of things we could talk about that later. Should we try to focus on Salman Farsi and his camp, what they believe, and how it was different from the Karaite camp, and how it's different from the Sadducee camp? Or should we focus on the distinction? How do we know that the Quran itself is a Miaphysite text rather than a Nestorian text? What do you think we should look at, or some other part of the history?
Well, perhaps, I'm actually interested in all of those, and I really would like to delve into each of those topics. What I'm really just trying to reconcile in my head is the whole fight, or rather extending the fight between Umar, Ali, Muawiyah, Abdul Malik, with those four characters, and how the belief starts to, say, form when these different, say, books are actually floating around. So if, unless we come up with something else that is greater priority, I would really love to have a conversation about that thing and the fall of Ali, which, you know, it triggers everything with the Shia. So it seems like quite an important moment in history.
All right. So let's talk about Muawiyah and, how he, what he represents when he came to power, Yazid, his son, and Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr. Let's go into some detail about that. And then let's look at that. Muawiyah, Yazid, Muawiyah II, Abdul Malik, and not Abdul Malik, sorry, Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr, and then Abdul Malik, and the fall of Hani ibn Qabis's the Alids, the Ali sort of faction in Iraq, how that was destroyed in Karbala. Let's look at that portion of history next week then, so we can get a clear political scenario in our heads and understand, the different attitudes of these leaders subsequent to the collation of these poems into the Mus'haf, right? And the attitudes of Muawiyah to it, the attitude of Yazid towards it, the attitude of Abdullah ibn al-Zubayr towards it, the attitude of Abdul Malik towards it, and the attitude of the Alids towards it, and how the I would say the camp from which this source came was the Alid camp, and how they totally lost out. They were completely eliminated from the picture. We should probably look into that and try and get a clear political sort of picture in our heads for the latter half of the 7th century. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I really look forward to that one. And I really hope that people listening that, well, because I'm actually asking questions so that I understand all of that very, very complex period of time. I really hope that people listening, that me asking you the questions in this manner is helping them as well
I hope so.
understand this complex period. So I hope that that's the case. And I look forward to asking lots of extra questions next week.
Thank you so much. Now, I'll just go through these comments just to say hello to everybody who said hello. We had John Lee saying shalom, shalom. So shalom, shalom to you, John Lee. Thank you for your comment. We have some comments from Sam, who says, you guys are on the cutting edge of the real history. Have you found any connection between Hatra, Parthian Arab province, and Hira, or any connection between the Parthians and the lost 10 tribes? Well, there is something to talk about that. But of course, obviously, we don't have any time to get into it right now at all, as we've run out of time. Additionally, similar, he says, to the Umayyads, the Parthians seem to have had their written records wiped despite being organized empires. Yes, and it's very clear that the Abbasids were involved in that. They wiped, I mean, obviously, the Umayyads, as you mentioned, they must have had a lot of records, but it's all gone. It's all gone because the Abbasids were in control. And they basically burnt everything which came beforehand. So we have an idea that it's a great pity because, you know, there could have been so much there. But there should be things in Spain because the Umayyads were not badly affected by the Abbasids at all, except for the very end of their empire in Spain. And the Abbasids never took control, really. They didn't control the narrative in Spain. So we should try and find out what archaeology survives from the Umayyad period. I mean, the early Umayyad period in Spain. That would be interesting to find out. We have a comment from San Con, but it doesn't really make sense. It says, where it say that. So I think it means maybe where it say that, but we missed the point of what he was asking.
That was a comment probably from about 2 hours ago. So.
Yeah, so sorry, Sam. I don't respond or even look at these comments as they're coming through often. So sorry about that. Next, we have Frederick Anderson, who says, are the hadiths reliable in my assumptions? The answer is absolutely not. We have to look for something before we even touch the hadiths. We have to have a framework to work with before we even touch the hadiths. And then we can only really look at the hadiths and say, are there any echoes of this scenario in the hadiths? Do the hadiths flesh out this picture a little bit more? Because if we have a picture which is not going to be contradicted by the hadiths, then we can turn to the hadith and say, okay, maybe let's have a look and see what the hadiths have got to say now. What does the seerah say now? But we cannot start with the seerah or the hadiths. We have to have something real before that. And so that's why we started with Sebios last week. And this time we started with the letters of Leo III. And then the kind servant is also asking, I would like to see it. And again, I don't know what you're referring to. Sorry, kind servant, because we were not looking at the comments as they were coming in. And Samcon has another comment here where he says, it's like everyone just takes Abyssinia out of the picture. They was a powerhouse at that time, he says. Well, they were important, and I haven't taken them out of the picture. I just mentioned last week that they were important in the location where many of these Nehemiah ben Hushiel's Jews took refuge after Khosrau turned against them. But I don't read Tigrinya. I don't know the language that these texts are written in. And I think it's called Tigrit. I only had students who spoke Tigrinya. They told me it's called Tigrinya, not Tigrit. Tigrit is an English way of saying it. And I don't speak that language. And unfortunately, I don't know what's written in those sources, and neither did my students, because my students were not historians. So sorry, but maybe somebody does have access to those texts, and maybe there's something in there which is interesting to look at. I would be interested to know too. So do post if you have an original source from the period, from the 7th century Tigrit sources, that be interested to see. We have a comment from Titans TV, Kalam L, saying peace to all, peace to you too. Titans, thank you for popping along. And Sam Con is saying to Titans, he's saying, Kalam, get on here, give that Abyssinian side. So apparently maybe that's the same Kalam L. Titan says, I've been here for the last 5 minutes trying to figure out where he's coming from. But yeah, everyone leaves out Abyssinian Genesis for the Quran and Proto-Islam. Perhaps we need to find out more of what you've got to say about the Abyssinian side of that. I also had a lot of Sudanese friends, and none of those have ever mentioned anything in such sources. Maybe the Sudanese don't know about those sources, perhaps. Okay, so let's carry on down. And Sam says that he's basically saying they're a type of Jew and made up a story. It's something like that. No, it's not what I'm basically saying. That's very, very misconstruing also what I'm saying. They were a type of Noahide. Omar was a type of Jew, but he converted. He was converted to this Miaphysite belief. Miaphysites are not a kind of Jew at all. Okay. Then we have Chris Lucas is just saying hello to everybody, popping on here. And Titan says he would love to join. So you're welcome to join. I would like you to send me an email if you want to talk about the Abyssinian side of things, Titans. Send me an email, redjudaism@gmail.com. We'll have a chit chat, and maybe you can come on and talk about some Abyssinian side of things. It'd be interesting to hear what you've got to say, especially if you can read the original sources. Chris Lucas says, that's an interesting way to look at it. I've never heard anyone saying our way of presenting things today is never heard anyone say like that before. And it's a pity, isn't it? Because it's so clear. So it explains everything. And there are pieces to this story from every source. We're just bringing all the sources together and just basically presenting them in one non-contradictory fashion so that they all make sense. That's all we're doing. It's what nobody else has really done before. And then he's going to go away and he's going to come back. We have Israel Kehlevain Sof, long time no see. Salam, and he says shalom. Then what else does he say? Long time no see. He says, he's speaking to Sam and Chris. He's saying the Protestant view. He's saying that they aren't Jewish, but rather a type of early Hebrew tradition similar to Messianic Judaism with lots of poems and stories to keep unity. Yeah, something like that. That's better. Great. Thank you for clarifying that for them. Do we have anything else from anybody else other than Kahel? And there's a long conversation with Kahel and Ein Sof and Sam and Titan, so I won't be going through all of those because that just is basically a conversation between all three of them. And we have also a greeting from Timbrang saying Shabbat Shalom. And the Shabbat Shalom to you too, Timbrang. It is the preparation day. And in many places, Sabbath has already begun. As you know, this channel promotes Sabbath observance, because that is something which we call the entrance into the kingdom of heaven, the gates of heaven. If you're not observing the Sabbath, from our point of view, from the religious mission of this channel, because this channel is actually a religious mission, and although JC is coming on and we're talking about history today, it's a religious mission on this channel. That's what my project is. And I encourage everybody to keep and observe a holy Sabbath. That is the kingdom of heaven on earth. And if you're not keeping it, then you will not have access to the kingdom of heaven on earth. What a pity. A great pity if you missed that. So let's see if we can keep a holy and kosher Sabbath. So don't forget to go and do your taharat before the time starts. Keep yourselves holy. And you will be able to make sure that any mistakes you've made you can clarify or rectify with the Havdalah at the end of the Sabbath, and then observe the week as you usually observe it. We're not wanting you to be Jews. We just want you to be saved. God bless you all. Take care and Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for coming on, JC. Good to chat with you.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for all the explanations. I really look forward to the next chat.
You too, and I do too. So God bless you. Hope you found it interesting. Take care. Don't forget to click like, subscribe, and the notification bell to not make sure you don't miss another one of these discussions. And do join in if you want to with the comments at the bottom of the video. Take care. Shabbat Shalom. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.